Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. We are at Blackberry Farm in Walland, Tennessee, and our guest is Andy Chabot. We'll talk to Andy about Blackberry Farm, their extensive wine and food program, and more. We'll be taking a tour of the cellars and sit down with the chefs and somms of Blackberry Farm and Mountain to discuss the interaction of wine and food, what we call a feast for your ears. During my interview with Andy, we'll be pulling bottles from the cellar and using those or drinking those wines for our chef and somm sit down. I'm your host, Sam Ben Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. New Englander and wannabe chef Andy Chabot attended the Culinary Institute of America at Hyde Park in New York. His love for food turned into a passion for wine. After CIA, Andy headed west to work at Wine Mecca, Little Nell in Aspen, eventually heading back east to settle at Blackberry Farm. But Sarah told me something, and don't answer it now because we'll get into it in a minute, that you went to CIA, went west, came back, and went back to CIA. All right, so I want to talk about that. He eventually headed back east to settle in at Blackberry Farm with second-generation owners Sam and Mary Celeste Ball. Sam, along with Andy, wanted to transform Blackberry Farm into a true wine destination. Mission accomplished. A couple of decades later, Blackberry Farm has over 150,000 bottles in their cellars, is the recipient of the James Beard Award for Outstanding Wine Program, along with 2 Best Chef Awards and numerous Wine Spectator Grand Awards. Andy Chabot is the Senior Vice President of Food and Beverage at Blackberry Farm and Mountain, right?
Yeah.
All right, we're off to the races. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Andy.
Well, thank you.
Thank
it's
you
great
for
to be here.
sitting with us and accommodating us. We are live at Blackberry Farm in Walland. We are somewhere below somewhere with a lot of wine surrounding us. So we'll be here for the next few days speaking with Andy. We'll be touring the cellars. We'll be sitting with chefs and somms, and we'll be discussing Blackberry's food and wine. All right, so Andy, let's get right into it. You grew up in New Hampshire, but you zigzagged your way around the country before you wound up here. Give me a brief background, and I alluded to some of it in the intro, on your journey in life and wine that ultimately got you to where we are today, which is Blackberry Farm.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. This is a real treat. So I started early in restaurants in New Hampshire, where I grew up. I grew up in a town called Hancock, New Hampshire, and every little town in New Hampshire has an inn. And I applied for a job at the Hancock Inn as a dishwasher. I did not get that job. So I applied for a job as a dishwasher at another restaurant in a neighboring town called Dublin. And the restaurant itself is called Del Rossi's Trattoria. David and Elaine Del Rossi owned that, and I got connected to them actually through my guitar teacher at the time, who was a professional musician, taught me guitar, but was also the chef of the restaurant. And so he kind of pulled me in as the dishwasher, and I started there. And it was before I had a license. My parents had to drive me there and pick me up. It's 20 minutes away, so not too bad for me. It could probably tough for them. But I kind of fell in love with the restaurant life at that time. I said,
The
"This
whole
is fun,
scene captivated
yeah,
you.
everyone's having everyone's working together. The rise and fall of service, just different levels of people working together was really intriguing for me. So I fell in love with that and decided to go to the Culinary Institute of America after I graduated high school, and that was great. I really thought I was going to be a cook and a chef.
So the initial trip there was for food.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got an associate's degree in culinary arts. And I went to moved to Aspen, Colorado, to
Just
work at the
quickly,
Little Nell.
How'd that come about? Was it
I'd
the
heard
connection?
about it. At the CIA, and at the time, so this is early 2000, like 2000 actually, or 99, some right 2000 I think. And internet was there, but not a huge resource that we used. It was more pamphlets and word of mouth. It's crazy to think about. But a lot of people did internships, at the Little Nell. So I heard about it and heard it was a great level of hotel, and Aspen sounded fun. I skied growing up and all that. So moved to Aspen, got a job at the Little Nell, and I was in the kitchen.
So that was the question I was going to have. So at that point, going to Little Nell wasn't about wine.
No, it wasn't. It
more
wasn't about
that
wine
it
at
was
all.
a destination
Yeah,
place.
and I didn't know
You'll
much.
Tell us how much
yeah.
of a wine place it is.
Well, you take a wine course at the CIA when you do the culinary program. And I was quite bad at it. I was barely 21, maybe at the time, not even 21. I don't think they had a special license you could taste wine. But I wasn't. I was new to me. It's a whole big world, and it was new to me. It intrigued me, but I wasn't good at it. And I really liked cooking, and I was going to be a cook. So I worked at the Little Nell. You get employee housing with Aspen Ski Company when you work with, at least you did. And so you get that for a year, and then it runs out, and you have to do something. And so instead of doing something, I went back to the CIA to get a bachelor degree in professional studies, really kind of a restaurant management degree. But while I was at the Nell, I did interact with the wine people, the sommeliers, and it looked like they were having a really good time. Coincidentally, it was Richard Betts, who was the sommelier at the time there. It was after Bobby Stuckey had left, Richard Betts was there.
So the alumni from there is crazy.
It's nuts.
Some of the great wine people. Bobby's certainly a mentor.
Yeah,
So
Bobby,
you had the
Richard, Carlton,
Right.
and all these people I've reconnected with later in life. But I didn't really know them then. The Little Nell was just a really top resort. But I went back to the CIA, got another degree there, and I want to be back in the East Coast. I want to be with my eyes had been open to great hotels and resorts. I want to be with a great hotel resort. And at the time, again, pamphlets, kind of the career services office. I looked at the Inn at Little Washington, the White Barn Inn in Kennebunkport, Maine, and then Blackberry Farm. The executive chef of the time had also gone to the CIA, and so they had some stuff in the career services office. So I made a trip south to the Inn at Little Washington, where I interviewed and staged, and I got an offer to get a job in the front of house as a waiter. But I said I also have another interview at Blackberry Farm. And I came down here. I got to stay here, which was lovely. I really just fell in love with
That was
this
their
place.
doing. They said, come down, stay, get a feel. Or...
Yeah, I applied, and in exactly that. They said, well, you can come down. It was a much smaller hotel at the time. Well, it was smaller, not as expansive. And, they allowed me to stay. And I got to eat the food. I got to meet the people. And just the energy of Blackberry Farm was something I fell in love with. I still feel that energy today. The quality of the sunlight, the people, everything about this place, I think, is magical. And I felt that then. And so I really fell in love with it. I met the owner at the time, Sam Bell, who interviewed me. I met the executive chef at the time, John Fleer. I met the dining room manager, Simon, and it worked out. So they offered me a job in the front of house. I'd never worked in the front of house. And I signed on. So the day after I graduated the CIA, I loaded up a U-Haul trailer attached to my little gray pickup truck, and I moved south. And I thought I'd give it a few years, see what happens. And when I started,
What do you mean
here,
a few years? Like,
well,
do
any
stuff
job you
here
think
and
you're going to
then
do
you
like 2,
head
3
out somewhere
years.
else?
Yeah. When you're 21, 3 years is a bigger percentage of your lifetime and a bigger commitment. But I figured that, I I've never had been really to Tennessee or what I would consider the South at the time. And so I didn't know really what to expect. But I moved here, got an apartment, started working in the front of house. I was a food runner to start. That's, the first job in the front of house. You bring food out to tables and you go back to the kitchen. You bring food out to tables.
Not the waiter.
Not the person taking the order or really interacting with the guests. But a nice way to get your feet, and learn how to carry 3 plates really well, this kind of thing, how to carry a tray. And then I became a back waiter and then a front waiter. And also at the time, Blackberry's wine program was starting to grow. If I went back a little bit in time, where Blackberry is, the county, Blount County, was a dry county. And so a few years before I got here, I started in 2002, so 3 or 4 years before I got here, Blackberry had gotten a liquor license.
Like around 99.
Like around 99, 98. If you look through our wine list, you'll see there's kind of a hard start in the wine list in vintages. And it's because of that. We couldn't buy wine before that. But that had changed, and we had started a wine program, and it was growing. And Sam Bell was the wine buyer and sommelier. He's working in the restaurant with us. But he needed help. I mean, he wasn't really going around asking for help, but he needed help. I started helping with inventory, with moving boxes, with receiving. I think it really allowed him to ramp up the buying because I would put it away. It's kind of the heyday of wine buying. We're getting, truckloads of wine. I was putting it away. And you're buying a lot at the beginning because the laws here, we have to buy through distributors. It's a 3-tier state. And so we can't...
Explain what that is quickly.
Sure. So if you own a restaurant in New York or San Francisco, you can go to the store, buy a wine, and then put it on your wine list. In Tennessee, you can't. In fact, that's completely illegal. We have to buy from distributors who have bought from either a winery or an importer, right? And the wines are registered to certain distributors. So a brand or a particular wine is registered.
Portfolio.
Right. And so that's how we have to buy wine. So you can imagine we can't buy, therefore, from auction or private collection because auctions and private...
To this day?
To this day, we can't.
So isn't that an availability issue? Like there are, you may have early patrons that are collectors and they're into vintage Bordeaux.
Yeah, I think it might get to some of your questions later.
But that changes how you buy wine.
It changes how we buy wine.
And how you store it.
Looking forward, we said one day we really want great vintage offerings. The only way for us to do that is to buy enough now that we can put wine in the cellar and have it 20, 30, 40, 100 years from now. Because how cool is it when someone pulls out a 100-year-old wine? Well, the only way to do that is to buy it 100 years ago for us. So that's what we started to do. So Sam was buying a good amount of great wines, making relationships. I started helping him. I was working as a server. And then, eventually sort of made the transition to sommelier, although it wasn't really a hard position at the time. It was, you served or you did wine, so it grew organically.
So a couple of quick questions, just going back so we can move forward. When you took the job, your touch point, who were you talking with? Was it Sam or his family?
Took the job. I mean, Sam and Simon, the restaurant manager at the time. Those were
the guys.
Simon was really my boss. They were assistant managers, but Simon. I started really getting involved with wine.
Did Sam report to Simon, technically?
No, Sam was taking over the business from his parents. Okay. Was my version of it. I think that's the timeline. He was really taking on Blackberry Farm, but in his...
The wine thing was...
The wine and the food was what he was growing because it's what needed to grow.
So, one last question on that. Where was Sam's exposure or knowledge to wine? Like, why is he the right
question.
guy?
So, it's really a great question. He, knowing that he was going to not have to, but wanting to run Blackberry Farm, post college, went to San Francisco Culinary Institute, and there spent a lot of time at farmers markets, at wineries, and such. And as part of that sort of experience, he also worked, I think he worked at the Ritz in San Francisco at the time. He worked at the French Laundry for a period of time. And for him, I think that was one of the biggest aha moments. And, you know, if you go back 25, 30 years from now and think of what the French Laundry was, I mean, they built it kind of, and then what was middle of nowhere a little bit, and that people came. I think Sam was thinking, we can do this in Tennessee. We have great gardens. We have great agriculture. We can have a great hotel, but it needs great food and wine. So I think that was his aha moment, was probably the French Laundry. He also made a lot of great connections with wineries during that time and with chefs and wine people.
So go back to the 3-tier thing. You meet Bill Harlan or Nayuka Del Valle.
Sure.
Were there wines available through the 3-tier system? Because could you have taken them direct from them?
Well, we can't, and we still can't, and we couldn't. But that's what Sam really started, and we continue to this day, was making these great relationships with small producers and boutique importers, getting them to believe their wines should come to us, and then saying, this is going to work out, send 12 bottles a year. We're going to introduce you to 5 different distributors. You decide who you want to sign up with. And the distributor...
So you meddled in all that stuff to make it happen in a good way.
In a good way. We pulled, the winery pushed, the distributor, you know, registered it, did their work, marked it up, and sent it to us. A pretty straightforward process, and probably pretty good for the distributors at the time.
Was anyone doing that, you know, around here?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, not really. You know, and I think at the time, I remember when I first moved here, people said, you know, Knoxville is like the city in this country where if you want to open a chain restaurant, you should do your experiment restaurant there because it's the chain capital of restaurant of the world. It's changed so much in 25 years. But really, no, that wasn't happening. Sam started doing that. And, you know, we started getting these amazing wines and putting some, you know, in the cellar.
Serving and selling.
That's how we're doing it.
All right, so we're going to get into that in a bit.
Yeah.
But, you know, while I have you talking about all this, just give me a little background on the farm.
Blackberry Farm?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, where the hell are we? I mean, we're in Tennessee.
It's a great question. So,
and then tell me, you know, quickly, there were 3 or 4 families involved.
Sure. So, so we are in Walland, Tennessee, which is in Blount County, Tennessee, which is right on the border of the Smoky Mountain National Park. And, I mean, we're very close to the North Carolina border, but
so way eastern.
We're way eastern, you know, Tennessee. A lot of people in Tennessee, they think of Tennessee as 3 or 4 quadrants. You have Memphis all the way to the west, Nashville in the center, Chattanooga in the southeast of Tennessee, and then Knoxville is East Tennessee. It's where the main UT campus is, and we're just south and kind of east of Knoxville, in Tennessee, right in the Tennessee Valley. It's a beautiful, lush area with rich agricultural, you know, history, and we have the Appalachian Mountains. So for me, it kind of reminded me a lot of New Hampshire as far as geography and such. As far as Blackberry Farm and some of its history, the Bells really own Blackberry Farm. Sandy Bell, who was Sam's father, and his wife Chris at the time bought Blackberry Farm. Sandy's business was Ruby Tuesdays, which was headquartered at that time in Maryville. He did. He founded it. Wow. I think he was selling burgers during game days at UT, and he got in trouble because he didn't have a business license. So he went and got a business license, and that started Ruby Tuesdays.
Wow.
They moved south for a while, kind of to the Mobile area, but then moved the headquarters back. And so they bought Blackberry Farm as their property. And they started having what I've always heard, they started having, you know, guests and corporate guests, and it kind of snowballed into an inn that then Chris really started running, Chris Bell, Sam's mother. And it was a small, you know, family-run inn. When I started, it had 44 rooms, but I think in '97 it had added some cottages. So 44 was where it was when I started. But it really, when they bought it, it was two buildings: the main house where you probably had breakfast today, and the house right next to it, the guest house. And it just kind of grew from there. And the Bells are still the family that own it. There are a number of properties around where people own homes, and we call them owners, but they're not Blackberry Farm owners the way the Bells own Blackberry Farm as a business.
Do they participate in the services that's available to them and everything?
Honestly, they've always been more on the service side of the spectrum. I mean, the owners can participate in the services, the people that own homes, but the Bells themselves really are hoteliers.
Right.
And they like to serve the guests and take care of the guests. So that's kind of a quick history. So 76 is when they bought the property and turned it into an inn.
So in 76, it was just a house.
Yeah,
it was
a farm.
A beautiful piece
it had
of property.
It had been a farm. In its history,
So
it had been an
Sandy
inn in the
and
past, but
They
Sandy and
decided,
Chris.
let's make a little inn.
Yeah, so let's make an inn. And then Sam came along, and he was born in 76. He came on around 2000, started taking the business over from his parents and grew it into a more world-renowned food and wine mecca, that focused on the garden and of this place.
Right.
So that was really Sam's
The vision
push.
today is
Yeah, it was
mostly
Sam's. It was mostly Sam's vision. Yeah.
and we're on 4,200 acres, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
it's about a 4,200 acre property. About half of that is an easement, so it's not all usable.
Protects you, though.
It protects us, and it protects the land.
Right.
They did the same thing when they bought Blackberry Mountain, the property Blackberry Mountain is on. They put over half of that in easement as well to protect it.
So talk about that for a second. Blackberry Mountain is a second destination, 7-8 miles from here. It's got that Blackberry imprint, but what differentiates it?
It does. So to begin with, they bought that property. Not everything always has to have a straightforward purpose, I think. And they bought that property because it was available, and it is right in the viewscape. When you sit at the main house on one of those iconic rockers and look out,
Right.
that mountain is right in the viewscape. And so they bought it because it was going to be sold. And so they thought, let's protect it. And they thought about it for a while. And then they decided they wanted to make it another resort. And so they started to develop the roads, everything you need to operate that. And in 2016, we really kind of ramped up the production of that. We opened it in 2018, I think. 2019. Sorry, time goes by. It was 5 years ago. So in February 2019, we opened Blackberry Mountain. And it's interesting. Blackberry Farm is very pastoral. It's very focused on the farm. We have sheep. We have this amazing garden. Blackberry Mountain, as the name suggests, is really a mountain. It's very rocky. It gets up almost to 3,000 feet in elevation. So you have these amazing views of the Smoky Mountains that you don't have. We're down in the valley, in the cove here, Blackberry Farm. You get up on the mountain, and the views are just stunning, and there's more easily accessible hiking. And it's a more sort of wellness-focused property where, here at Blackberry Farm, absolutely you can have a wellness-focused escape. You have to make that your agenda. At Blackberry Mountain, you can have a very luxurious kind of food and wine, focused escape, but you have to make that your agenda because, more easily
resort.
You're active over there. So
Which is a nice option.
it is a nice option, and it is just as luxurious. It's a little. It has different vibe to it, but it's an amazing hotel, and I'm lucky I get to work at both places and get both experiences.
So just confirm this for me. Tomorrow we're going to go over there. I think we're sitting with Logan.
Yes.
And we'll be able to talk, and the chefs.
Yeah.
We'll be able to, talk specifics about the lists, some differences, the food.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to the farm, which,
Perfect.
we'll spend, most of our time here. When Sam decided that he had to make this a wine destination, was the food evolved at that point, or it was in conjunction with the wine?
The food was actually very evolved at that point.
So the wine was the right complement. And
yeah, it's what
yeah.
needed to happen. Guests could have wine served to them if they brought wine with them and paid a fee to join a club. So at the time, you could join the Mountain Club. I think we charged $1 because we had to charge something.
Right.
And we could serve wine. But that was not the way into the future.
No. As far as a business plan.
As a business plan, as just being able to introduce people to things.
Right. I'm curious, because, as we sit in this wine room, what were the wines early on that you felt you needed immediately? It's like, I guess it was what you can get.
It was a
but
little
if you
of
can
that.
get what you wanted, the direction you guys wanted to build out, did you need the Napa cold calves? Did it have to be Burgundy in those days, which was different than now?
It wasn't Burgundy. Actually, it was very California centric.
Okay.
To begin with, that was Sam's experience. It was the connections we had, and he really was making true connections with these family-run, wine estates. And I think at first that and still to this day, small production, family-run wine businesses, wine estates, are kind of what scratch our itch. That make good wine. I should also say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there are certain wines that a serious wine program should have, and that has changed over the years. What those
let's talk
are.
about that. So the initial philosophy was go out and get the best wines. California was kind of representative for what you were doing here, and that. But so tell me about some of that evolution, and I'm curious how much the consumer had a pull. It's like, this guy's a good, guest. He comes back every year. He's a Bordeaux drinker. How did that evolve?
Well, it was very interesting in the way we do wine service is, and we're very, I know this, we're very lucky. Our guests put themselves in our hands a lot and allow us to sort of introduce them to things. If we introduce you to the wrong thing, we'll fix it, which is nice. You don't get that leeway in a lot of restaurants. So that to say, we were introducing our guests to a lot. You say, oh, you're going to have the trout dish. I remember specifically pouring early vintages of Lambourne Zinfandel with a particular trout dish we had. And people were like, Zinfandel and trout, amazing, But I remember doing that. So we were introducing people to these wines that we believed in.
Wait, tell me a second why that works.
Well, that particular trout had like a red eye butter sauce.
So you're pairing to the sauce
I
and
think
the fish.
I think you often pair to the sauce.
The chefs will tell us that too.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about pairings in my life, and I think the sauce drives it. But also, two delicious things together are often delicious. And those two things were delicious. And I just remember that particular early, pairing. And so these small production American wines is where we were really focused at first. But, we started to really know that, a serious collection probably should have some other things like Burgundy and what have you.
Was that you figured it out, or
No,
you were getting feedback
Sam,
like, hey, a couple of guys are asking for Burgundy. We're not stacked with that.
No, not so much that. It was more as we traveled and saw things we were excited about and saw what people were excited about. We said, maybe that should be part of our program. Things like classic French regions were probably the next big thing we went to. But I remember a conversation I had with Sam in around, 05, 06, 07, somewhere in there. And he said, what do you think about Austria? Is it a serious region? If we're going to get to, let's not dip our toes in, let's get, crazy wines. And that was in the Terry Teese kind of like
Great portfolio.
Amazing portfolio, trips and that sort of a thing. And so, we kind of made decisions. I remember very clearly.
Did that pan out? You committed to Austrian
committed to
wine?
Austria. We love Austrian wines. Our relationships of who brings it in has changed over the years, which is one of the hardest things to stay on top of is the shifting nature of what and how we can get it. I think, Burgundy, Bobby Ketcher was a very early friend of Blackberry Farms, where same type of relationship. We make a relationship with like a Bobby and Martine. Those are kind of our big Burgundy and Rhone go-tos, kind of in the first iteration of when we started doing that kind of wine. And we had them here. We did events. We met them. But those are back in the days when they were trying to sell Chateau Reyes and trying to sell Seraphim and
crazy?
Dugat.
When you look back at Burgundy and you look at those, Grenache wines, what the availability then and the cost versus now.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, it's nuts. But, I mean, that's the game. That's part of the game.
Did the food dictate the wines you would buy, or you would buy just, what you thought was right? Did your personal preferences in a good way get in the way? I had asked you earlier, did the consumers drive it? And they did a little. So
I think
was it you guys like, I love this, so I want to buy it?
It's a good question. I'm not.
And then, this food, Sam gave it a name. It's called
Foothills Cuisine.
Foothills Cuisine. So now, in a sense, you have to pair or have a cellar that.
Well, and so I think that it's a question. I'm not sure if anything was done too intentionally.
Okay.
But the wines that go with the food that we like and the food of this place are certain types of wines. And they're also kind of the wines we like. So I'm not entirely sure that we said, okay, this is exactly the kind of food we're going to make, and we're going to do these wines.
It was kind of a mix.
Kind of like we like these things, like the Rhone-style wines, the Burgundy-style wines. They go well with the food of the South and the cuisine of the South, which is real vegetable-driven cuisine. If you go to south of France, you find very similar kind of cuisine. And in Burgundy, you get that home-style kind of food to some degree. So I think yes, we're buying wines we liked. The food was kind of the food we liked, and I think that's one of the reasons it works. And then I think we have to push ourselves in other directions to make sure we have wines that guests want, because it's not a goal of ours to push people away. To say, I know you like that, but we don't want to serve that. Like our guests come and stay with us for 3 nights on average, and so if you like a certain thing as a guest, we want more than one option. We want 9 options.
And these are guests that tend to sit down and look towards you to taste or get recommendations. So these are wine people.
They're wine people or not. They might have come here to go fly fishing, but
Right.
Then we show them a wine they like and they love it. And then next time they come back, we need another option. So other restaurants, they're kind of you come to them maybe once. Here you're at least 3 nights.
Right.
And so we need a big enough wine program to span that.
You're intuitively you want to impress and show people new stuff. Let's veer off for a second. I'm going to put you on the spot because you're an obsessed Grenache guy, right? Is that fair?
It's fair.
So Grenache, we start in the south of the Rhone, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, right? You mentioned Reyes.
Yeah.
Does that extend to all Rhones, whether it's Spain? Do you like anything in the north of the Rhone? Tell me about this little obsession and when did that hit?
I will. So honestly, it was. I'll go back to Sam again on that. I love Burgundy also in Pinot, and we always kind of talked about like what goes better with this, Pinot or Burgundy, Pinot or Grenache.
What goes better with foods?
Yeah, because we would try things.
All right.
And I have an opinion about it now, but I was really obsessed with Burgundy more at the time, and Sam really loved these Rhone style wines. And, he was a early adopter of like Sine Qua Non's list. Right. He read.
Did you bring in Manfred's wines?
He did for his personal. The way those wines are sold.
Wasn't so much on the list.
No, well, the way those wines are sold, it's
crazy.
You have to pay for them ahead of time. And Tennessee distributors can't pay for product they haven't taken. And so we weren't able to buy those personally.
Got screwed on that.
Yeah, but Sam had and his wife Mary Celeste has a really great collection of Sine Qua Non. But he'd read Robert Parker and call up the Krankles and kind of thing. And he called up Eric Solomon one time and said, I've been reading some reviews of your wines, and I'd love to meet you, love to have you out here. And Eric introduced us to some of the great wines of Spain, and some of those I think first scratched my Grenache itch a little bit. The Priorat wines that are based in Carignan and Grenache, and back then some of them had Cab and things. But those I really fell in love with. In particular, Clos Erasmus was a wine I remember we could buy it. Yeah, I bought a few bottles at the local wine store because they got a 6-pack, and we got 2 6-packs. And there was the '01 vintage. I really fell in love with it. And that kind of got me more into Grenache, and eventually I got to Chateauneuf-du-Pape, where Sam was already at Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
Spanish and then went.
I did.
Yeah,
Sam in the program started more with Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
Hey, while we're on it,
yeah.
just for Spanish Grenache, you just gave me a maker, Chloe Erasmus. Give me a couple other things, that you enjoy that's in the cellar.
For Spain? Or?
Give me a few other, wineries.
Well, like I said, Chloe Erasmus is a great one.
I just had a wine, Laurel.
Laurel is
it's
a
less
second label.
expensive. I was at a tasting and it showed
It's an amazing wine.
Yeah.
It's kind of Daphne Gloria who owns that winery. It's some of her younger vines, things that don't make the 8 to 12 barrels of Erasmus. She has stuff in amphora that goes into that. It's a really cool project. I shouldn't say second label. It is a different label under the same producer. Let's see. I mean, the Commando G project, which is in Grados.
Who's it, David or
Danny Landy?
Daniel, right.
I mean, high altitude.
You like that stuff? Is that a more modern style, or
it is?
It is.
I think it's a totally different style. It's light. It's elegant. It's more Pinot-like.
Okay.
It's very light though. Some people.
And it's not that expensive.
Some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So they've recently gotten some fame.
Well, everyone has. Give me one more.
Another producer in that same region that I also like is Bernabellova. They make a nice Berna.
Berna. One word.
Bel.
AVA.
Yeah.
Belova.
Belova.
Okay.
It has a bear on the label. They make a few different bottlings. It's a producer who hasn't quite gotten the fame of Commando G, and so their prices are maybe a little more approachable sometimes.
That's why I ask you these questions, because our listeners could go out, hunt it down, have it, and then it becomes something. And you were there. What? This is a silly question, but I can't not ask it, because who better again to answer it? Differences between Southern Rhone Grenaches and the Spanish we just talked about. Mm-hmm. Is it blend? Is it climate? Is it winemaking? Like, I'm sure if I think gave winemaking, you one of each, you'd know right away.
Probably. When we talk Southern French Grenache, Southeastern France Grenache, I should say, that's Côte de Rhône, Chateauneuf-du-Pape, Chicken Dust, that kind of thing. I find those wines have a wild quality. They have a sort of often a brambly quality and a little bit of sometimes like a warmth to them. And I think on the Spanish side, it's still obviously Mediterranean, but like the wines of the Priorat, which is a region great for Grenaches, they're dark. They have often a lot of Carignan, or they have Carignan in them, which makes them kind of dark and mineral driven.
More than in
clean.
The French, the Rhone.
Yeah, in the Rhone you get different soils. In Priorat you have slate, and on the other side, in the Roussillon, you have slate. So kind of Grenache on both sides of the border there in the Pyrenees Mountains are similar, but they have a darkness and a cleanliness, a minerality to them. In Chateauneuf-du-Pape, I think you get that wild garrigue, lavender, thing, that Southern France,
very typical
thing.
So go to Southern Rhone, and again, while I have you, give me 3 recommendations. Give me, that all-time favorite or no cost involved in picking it. Give me that one that's always there, made by a family or Bocastle that's terrific. Right. And then give me a value-oriented play.
Sure. I'll start maybe with value. And I think that, and some of the first ones I got introduced to in the Southern Rhone, the wines of E. Gigal. Gigal Winery, right? They make some of the most Guigal.
Yeah, right.
Family-owned, third generation coming on. They've expanded, but that classic, it's like a yellow and red label. Chateauneuf-du-Pape and a Côte de Rhône from them. Like their Côte de Rhônes, I think, a great value. It's if you want to know what Côte de Rhône tastes like, buy that bottle. It's probably like $11, $12. And they make some of the most sought after, highly priced wines in the Rhone Valley too. So they span the gamut. But I think at that level, there's a ton of value and really great typicity in their wines of the Southern Rhone.
Now, if you go in the middle for solid makers,
Solid maker, I would think like Domaine de la Jeunesse. I really love Domaine de la Jeunesse. They make a few different cuvées. They make Côte d'Aron. They make a Grenache heavy cuvée called Chopin, or Chopin from the vineyard Chopin. But really great family-run winery. And then maybe one of my favorites and harder to get is the old vine bottling that Domaine de Marcoux makes.
Marcous.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, they make two Chateauneuf red bottlings, and one is called Old Vine. It's 100% Grenache. It's 115-year-old vines, at least at their oldest vines, and it's just a very pure, elegant wine from Chateauneuf, where a lot of the others are kind of wild and intense.
Right.
That wine has this elegance that I think really makes it a special wine.
You didn't mention Reyes, but is Reyes that? I mean, I know
Reyes is really special and unique and harder to get now than ever before,
right.
And expensive now. And they're interesting. They've held on to a lot of vintages. Their most current release, I think right now, is 11.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, for years he's been holding on to wine. They're a hard winery. You can't really visit them. Although I have visited them, but you can't just walk into them. They're not very open that way.
Well, you have to have some sway with most people.
Well,
they'll answer the call or see you. Doesn't mean they'll give it to you.
I honestly, it was if you go with Martine Saunier, you can get it in. She made them famous in this country.
Yeah, a lot of wines.
Yeah, she made a lot of wines famous. But I was lucky enough to go with her. But those wines kind of have a mythical, value or quality, and I love them. I didn't mention them just because they're really unattainable wines.
Yeah.
Even the Côte d'Arons are hard to get.
I mentioned it, and I'm glad you didn't put that in the mix because, what's the point? So that was good. We have to take a quick break. We're talking to Andy Chabot. Andy is the Zen master of all things food and wine at Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain. When we come back, Andy, I have a few more questions. Then I want to get your take on a bunch of other things. So you're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. We're back with my guest, Andy Chabot. Andy is the Senior Vice President of Food and Beverage at Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain. We were talking about building the wine program up early on, and Sam had that vision, and then you jumped in and helped him. Did you guys have money to buy this? I mean, did his parents think he was crazy? It's like, what are you guys doing?
We must have had the money to do it because we did it. But it wasn't really for me to ask at the time. I was a very junior person in the company. But I think
you were part of it. I mean, Sam was on the hook for it.
I was part of it. But yeah,
do you think his dad pulled him in some shed, smacked him, and said, "What are you spending all this money on this wine for?"
There may have been conversations about that, but I like to think there were probably more conversations about vision and how do we accomplish it. Because I think that was always
so. Let's talk the vision. That was kind of my next question. You kind of laid out the vision early on. Let's get a wine program going. Napa was, a big thing at the beginning. Right. And you mentioned a little, but how did it morph time-wise? Like you mentioned Burgundy and Bordeaux.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Did the Bordeaux thing come 2 years later, 6 years? How was the vision fulfilled and what did it morph into?
So, interesting question. So some of it was just time and place. I think the next, so it was very California. And then we added, Burgundy and Rhone. That was kind of, and then some Spain with Eric Solomon. So it was,
so
Bobby,
Burgundy and Rhone was
Bobby
pretty
Ketcher,
much
Martin
the
Saunier.
second big
That was
push.
kind of the second push.
Yeah, okay.
And Spain was a push after that. Australia became very important with Dan Phillips and the Grateful Palate at the time. And there were some great wines. And a lot of it was the resources we had. Again, internet was coming on, but it was more like, what are you reading? What are you seeing in restaurants when you travel? So, some of the big expansion points, like when we added Chapoutier wines to our program, we added a lot of them. We had Michel Chapoutier here, and we did an event, and we added kind of his whole lineup. We started buying those year after year. I remember specifically when we added the wines of Gigal, the Côte Rôties, the La La wines, and Fred Eck, who owned the Cellars at the time, he sold those, to us. I remember when we brought in Chave with Langdon Shiverick. So I remember these moments,
right,
where we added kind of
the Lalas, the Hermitage from Chave,
right, like these crazy.
I mean, that
wines.
brings you to another level.
Yeah, and then we start, you start that relationship and you keep buying them, and you get Dugat from Ketcher, and you get Seraphin from Ketcher, and you get Loire. I remember again specifically we added Loire in Reyes with Martin. I mean, it was you could buy cases of Loire at the day, and you could buy them. You still can now, but you can't get. They're expensive, really expensive now. But then they were saying like, here's an offering. Would you like it? It was a great time to buy wine. And then into Spain.
So come back to Spain a second. So with Martine Saunier, is that
Saunier? Yeah.
She took a liking to you guys, or she got what you were doing, because she kind of opened the door with open arms, and gave you a shot, or maybe it wasn't established yet and she was just trying to sell stuff. I mean,
it was a little of that, actually. It was a little of that,
and you were takers.
There was a guy that I'm still friends with now. He worked, he was from Knoxville. He worked at the local distributor that sold Martine's portfolio, and his name's Jay Latham. He works with Robert Bohr's company now.
Right.
And
Grand
Cru Selections. And a great lover of great wine. He had a friend that owns a restaurant called the Tomato Head, and they always drink great wine. And he was looking at this portfolio, and he was really the one coming to us and saying, you guys need to, look at this. And they had European cellars, and they had Martine Saunier, those portfolios. And so he was like, you guys should be looking at these wines and buying these wines, and this is crazy.
Timing was great, right?
Timing was perfect.
I mean, you got in early.
Yeah, we got in early. We established those relationships, and I think Martine then kind of took an interest. She's like, what's this place in Tennessee that's buying all this wine? I think was more the beginning of that, and then we had her for an event, and really established a relationship with her on that end,
So you mentioned event a few times.
Yeah.
And I think events help you circumvent some of the obstacles that you had. You were able to technically do an event, bring the winemaker down, serve those wines to your customers, have them see the operation and go, wow, the event thing was kind of an important.
They were important. It started really, you're right, it is twofold. One, we really wanted to have our guests meet these people the way we've met them. We also, we're running a hotel. We're trying to sell the hotel, and events help with that. So there was that. We want our guests to meet these people. And then, yes, we wanted these people very much to come see our guests, our establishment, how we treat their wines, and the quality of our guests. And we just knew they'd want to get their wines in front of these people once they met them, and in this place once they got to see it. Because, for a long time, people were like, no, I sell my wines in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. I don't sell them in some place in Tennessee. I had a conversation.
When they walked out of here.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Robert Chatterton years ago, and he was like, why would I sell my wines in Tennessee? I sell them all in New York. It's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Kind of narrow-sighted.
Sort of, but I also get it.
But the guys that bought in, you would then follow up, as you said earlier, and say, look into an importer or a distributor.
Yeah, look into a distributor.
Going, right?
Like here's,
and they'll go, yeah, sure. Right?
Like here's a distributor that you should talk to. Here's 3 or 4 of them, and you decide. It's your business. But if we want to make this work, if you want to make it work, here's
It was a good idea. This is a great backdrop for doing events.
Oh, it's amazing.
Educated,
It's
customers.
amazing. We still do, food wine events.
Sure, you can get anyone you want here.
Almost. Yeah, and the timing is always an interesting thing, but we had some fun ones
Sarah,
already this
who
year.
wouldn't want to come here, right? All right, so we're doing a sit down with Andy Chabot, but this is the beginning of a lot more things. We're going to tour the cellar. We're going to sit down with chefs. So, we spend a little time talking about, our own wines and, things like that. We're going to talk about a lot of other things, and you're going to, pick all kinds of things out, which we'll talk about. I want to ask you about some general wine stuff.
Okay.
Pretty base question, but, again, you're the right guy. What changes and trends have you noticed these days? Like you see them and you say, I don't need to apply that to Blackberry. Or you say these are fairly powerful and we have to, take note of these.
Yeah.
Look at the last few years, 5 years, even
Yeah.
a major one from when you started to now.
It's interesting. We have always been focused on classics. I think classics are classics for a reason, and they'll likely continue to be. So the question is always, is this a new classic that we're just seeing emerge? Or is this
like
a flash
Commando
in the pan?
G.
Like Commando
you
G.
mentioned it, not
Yeah.
me. That in your mind is
Well, it's
worthy of
classic.
a new classic.
Yeah, I think, that style of wine, that maybe era of winemaker, you can throw like maybe Acapinti in there or Kos or
From Sicily.
there's a new one I just tried from Sardinia, Cananao, that is in that same vein.
Cananao is-
Cananao is the grape, Sardinia is the region, Cananao de Sardinia, and that's Italy's Grenache region.
Okay.
But I just tried one that is stunning, and I'm trying to get. It's from Vinifera Import. He introduced it to me. But so I think that style of wine, that generation of winemakers, are a current classic in the making.
And you want to be part of it.
Yeah, and I think they're true wines, and they'll last, and it might last a full generation, but some classics are that.
Could you think of an example of something that's getting a lot of attention that you don't think is a classic? I don't know if you can answer it or
Well,
not,
I
but
can.
it's like,
I mean-
what's all the hoopla about that? That'll never be a classic to me.
It's an interesting question. I think, in the last number of years, and it's come and gone, is, the topic of natural wine.
All right, so that was a separate question I
Okay.
had. So this is our segue into the natural. You're going to tell me what you think.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me if it is applied or does it have to be, So let's have a little dialogue on that.
Absolutely. I had a conversation just the other day with someone who was sharing some wines with me to buy, and he said he used to run the natural wine program, and he said it was very confusing for me because
It is confusing.
it's hard to tell what goes on that list and what doesn't go on that list, who gets to decide. I think my take on it is wine is by definition an interventional thing. Sure, fruit can rot and ferment naturally, but to make a good product, you have to intervene and guide the process. If you can do that in the most minimal way, I think that's great. But natural wine, to me, it's a strange term, frankly. I mean, wine is a natural thing. The less you tamper with it but still make a great product, I think the better.
Fair.
And so that's kind of my take.
I mean, those
think
are all the tenets of natural wine. I mean,
well, they are,
Romani Conti is
but those are
biodynamic,
those are the tenets
right?
of great wine.
Yeah.
And so I think where it gets strange, and probably where some of it came out of, was the orange wine movement. Where Grosvenor came on the scene, changed his winemaking, Radicon,
all that skin contact.
Radicon,
It
Grosvenor.
got crazy.
It got crazy. Some people make great ones, like Grosvenor and Radicon. I think a lot of people took it as a chance to make wines that weren't as sound as they could have been. They were.
But
kinda
that's the wine business. When a trend does happen,
no. Why not jump on a trend?
yeah. I think Sutter, that Zinfandel was probably skin contact wine anyway.
Well, yeah,
right?
it's probably a mistake at some
It
point.
was a
Someone-
mistake. I had
it's like-
Roger Trinchero
yeah?
on, and they made a mistake, and they go, "What do we do with it? Well, we'll bottle it and see
Sure,
what happens."
marketing, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that I think the orange wine movement kind of crashed into the natural wine movement. Then natural wine caught on as a label, but I think the best natural wines are just some of the best wines.
I agree.
And maybe the other
So
way,
you don't have
the other
to
way of saying it is-
categorize it. But this question plays into it. Has there been a shift in the consumer? Obviously, us old people are dying off. Younger people are coming up. I'm not sure they're drinking as much wine. They may be into mixology. They may be into beer. But they also may be bigger proponents of natural wine than, my generation, even though I am. So is that shifting things? And does that reflect in your clientele? Like, are there younger people on the floor more in the past few years than?
Yeah, there are younger guests. There's younger team members. The different hotels bring in different clientele to some degree. But as far as what we buy and what we share, we kind of hang our hat again on great wines made by family-run wineries for the most part, that are or will likely be classic.
So you said something that I want you to say again, which falls into kind of what your philosophy and mission is. You mentioned smaller families. So just kind of reiterate it and tighten it up. The wines that are important to you to have and serve are from?
Well, they're from family-owned and operated wineries. Often, especially if they have a generational approach, it matches what Blackberry Farm does. That can change. You can love a winery that then they sell, you know, and they still make great wine.
The kids screw it up.
The kids don't want it. I mean, you know, whatever it is. You're seeing a lot in France of wineries being bought by businesses, and in Napa as people monetize, you know, this. I mean, a lot of people start a business so that you can sell it. You know, it's like that's the they don't want to necessarily pass it down, but some people do, and we want to support those people.
So, last question on that part: are the younger people more inquisitive about natural wines, or more about the story? Because the small family thing plays into that.
Well, it does.
You know, and how they view sustainability and intervention, which they're all pretty good about.
It's their land,
but it's not enough where it's moving the needle. It's just it does what it does.
I think maybe this will answer your question. I think the biggest problem with the natural wine movement is it's not an actual label term. There's no governing body to say this is natural, that's not natural. So it is up to us as sommeliers or consumers even, what is important to us. I usually wouldn't take a bottle of Alban Syrah and say this is a natural wine.
Right.
But John and now his son and his wife, they're all working at the winery. It's their home and their property. They treat the soil responsibly. They farm responsibly. They're looking far into the future. It is a natural wine.
You don't have to
by
label
definition.
like Tablas Creek is
right. Tablas Creek, another great one. The Haas family. I mean,
they just do it because it's the right thing.
It's the right thing. Yeah. They're not getting behind the
well, that's
this
the problem
marketing
with natural wines. Everybody wants, a label. I'm glad
the labels can be. I'll just say labels can eventually they could be dangerous because then if the tide turns, people go, I don't like natural wine. Most people love good wine.
Right.
So get behind that. Good wine.
Right. So it's not the wines, it's the labeling, really, what we're talking about.
I think it is. It's
I think that's
the
fair.
rhetoric surrounding the wine.
That's legit. All right, we got to wrap up. I want to do a thing we call the wine list, but I had a couple other questions. I had to write this question down because I was just curious. Do you think seeing the world of wine from the lens of being in Tennessee, the Smoky Mountains, is any different than, let's say, if you were in New York or Chicago or LA? I mean, is there something about being here that just makes you view everything differently, or it is what it is anywhere?
I don't know if it's because it's Tennessee, but I think it is because if you're in New York, Chicago, wherever, there's a lot of competing ideas and thoughts, and you're surrounded and inundated all the time with opinions or this new thing or that old thing or whatever. Here, we're kind of an island a little bit, and we sort of get to think about stuff, evaluate things, come up with our own opinions, and I think through that, I notice I have opinions that are different than when I go and talk to friends in New York who, they like, you got to go here, here, and here. And I'm like, that doesn't really interest me. I want to go here, here, and here, kind of a thing. So I think it is, it's a little more like we're not keeping up with the Joneses as much, if that kind of makes sense. So we develop our own ideas and thoughts.
Sounds more fun.
I think it's fun.
It's more do what you want and
do what we want, and then it's like build it, and then they come, and then you share that. Versus we have to do it this way or think this way. So
you're either right or that's just a justification or an excuse for being in Eastern Tennessee, but it doesn't matter because I think you're right.
If you can make it right, it's okay.
Can we shift for a minute because we're going to probably talk about it as we go? But there's a fairly amazing spirits program here.
Yeah.
and a well thought out mixology program.
Yes.
You look at these drinks and the ingredients. I'm sure some are homemade, and certain gins and all of that. Tell me a little about. I know you have a huge bourbon collection. I know Scotch always plays in.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that.
Sure. So, where we are, just south of Kentucky, a lot of our guests, I think, expect a great bourbon experience. They come here and they search it out, and we do have that. We built relationships very early on with some amazing people, like Julian Van Winkle and people like that. And you can go to Kentucky very easily from here and visit distilleries. So it was very natural for us to build a bourbon collection. And when we were doing that, there's a guy working here. His name is Andrew Noy, who was kind of my counterpoint. He was in the beverage, the spirits part, and I was in the wine part. And then Sam kind of said, build the most amazing bourbon collection. And so he did that, and he kind of brought in all these brands that at the time people weren't talking about, like A.H. Hirsch and
like Burgundy in the old days.
Burgundy
it was
in the old days.
accessible, it wasn't expensive, and it was famous.
He worked out. We had our house bourbon for like 2 years. It was 15-year Pappy. I mean, we made drinks with that. I remember a drink called the Old Western.
Mixed with 15-year-old.
We had a drink on the menu called the Old Western. It was 2 shots of Pappy 15, peach bitters, a sugar cube, and an orange. And man, it was delicious. And it was like $18. It was like, out the door. Times have changed. But that was, so we bought a lot and put a lot away.
Did you, same philosophy, like you needed to buy vintage to have for later? Let's buy bourbon, not to serve
we took
next week.
Bunch away, thinking at some point the bubble's going to burst. And it did. And now you can't buy some of those anymore. You get 2 bottles a year, that kind of a thing. Distribution changes. So we did that same thing where we really created, I think, a great library of things. And some of those things aren't even on any list. They're just for the future. And that's just how that is. So that was kind of the basis of the spirits program. Then mixology, that's changed a lot over the years. As I remember, Appletinis were really important to guests when I first started here. And that's gone away. But, of course, espresso martinis have come back. And they're not going anywhere, it doesn't seem.
No.
But they are also delicious. So, it's hard to argue. But, mixology, we try to have seasonal, lists of cocktails, try to use our farm and our garden and foraged items as much as possible.
Like mint and thyme.
Yeah, mint and thyme and things. And then, again, we stick to very sort of classic things.
Right.
There might be variations of, but often very classics.
We saw on the menu a Blackberry Farm,
the bumpkin,
Blackberry infused vodka.
Yeah,
which is something you infuse here or
whatever.
Yeah,
it's a blackberry flavored. Then we put dried blackberries in it, and that's a drink that's been on our list for like 18 years.
Oh, that's like
we tried to take it off, but we can't.
Yeah.
Guests want it. So that's one we got to stick with, and I think Andrew came up with that drink too. So,
all right, Andy, we're going to be talking a lot more, but we're going to move on to shutting down this interview. But before we go, I want to throw the wine list at you. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. I don't want you to dwell on them. Don't take too long. I may make you spell stuff so that people can go out and look for it. All right, so the first question is, what are you drinking now? And that's in the context of what's at home in the fridge. What do you need to be tasting maybe for here? The seasons are changing, so does that move it? Tell me some things you're drinking now.
So right now, spring is really starting to happen. And I'm really shifting what I find myself really wanting white wine right now. And often I drink more white than red, because when I drink wine, it's usually when I get home, it's late or what have you. So refreshing whites. I love Sauvignon Blanc. I love Sancerre. I love Gruner Veltliner. And it's hard to ignore a good Chablis.
Can you think of any producers that come to mind?
Well, maybe, let's see, I work backwards. Chablis, like Laurent Tribut. I really love.
Is great value, great quality.
That's a sister
compared
of
to Dauvasset and Ravenel.
Yeah. So I love that, and you can buy it still fairly affordably.
Good call.
For Gruner, I love Pichler. FX Pichler makes great wines across the board. And Sancerre, Claude Riffaut. I really love their wines.
Is that Riffault?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Are those good the quality is good. Is they're not crazy expensive?
Not crazy expensive.
Okay.
That's what's fun.
So those are good recos. Anything else you're drinking?
Well, I taste a lot of wine for Blackberry, and that always throws me off because my value,
Right.
thing is thrown. And we just had an event with Gigal, and we on the final dinner we tried 13 amazing wines that I couldn't personally put in the cellar. So I get to try all these crazy wines, and so I don't really drink that much else.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. The business part of it kind of draws you into that.
Yeah.
So you unwind with lighter, whites
more
that are
refreshing.
more your style. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Second question, and I get my balls busted for this question sometimes because it's kind of the goofiest, but this particular one is kind of your wheelhouse. I mean, you've pontificated on this. The question simply is your favorite wine and food pairing. Not what the ultimate one is, but what and you don't eat it obviously every week, weekend, night, but what's that? This wine and this blah blah go together so well.
Well,
You do a couple.
I can. I mean, some that comes to mind quickly, and this is going to be kind of lowbrow, highbrow, maybe. But man, Chateauneuf-du-Pape and pizza.
Why does that work?
Well, I think a lot of what goes on and in pizza, it's very Mediterranean, obviously. And Grenache, I mean, Chateauneuf-du-Pape is like the beginning of the Mediterranean as we think about it. It's where the Rhone becomes this, lavender fields and tumbleweed. And I had an amazing experience years ago at a closed hotel. For some reason, we were there. It was like The Shining. It was empty. And me and a buddy, we had a bottle of Great Chateauneuf. And the only thing open was a pizza place. And they had, olive and pepperoni pizza. Man, it was good with a Grenache-dominated Chateauneuf-du-Pape. And I still love that.
So
I
I think I can
too
be
lowbrow?
confident and say that was the most eloquent answer to that question of the 300 times I answered it.
Oh, my gosh.
Because most people go, champagne and fried chicken. I'm like, why does that work? Well, the bubbles cuts through.
Yeah.
They're fried, and that's the end of the conversation. So
Champagne and fried chicken is not to be trifled with either.
No. Can we deviate for a second?
Yes.
And we'll come to our third. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this perception or noticing it, but is champagne a big thing here, or it's more of a, do you feel that you have all the makers and lots of lists? Is that driven by the consumer here? Your desire to have less than Chateauneuf?
It's interesting. It's actually sort of hard to stay on top of having enough champagne. We in other sommeliers that have worked here over the years, they say this place is crazy. You guys go through so much champagne. I don't think it's us. I think a lot of people travel here and they're celebrating, and champagne's a great beverage.
It's the celebratory beverage.
But we use it a lot, and we have receptions and things like that. So it's, I guess, to answer that question, we go through it a lot. Our guests ask for it a lot. We love it. And so the selection of it it changes more constantly than other parts of our list, and is also a little smaller, although it's like 3 or 4 pages of champagne. But, we've run out of stuff, and then you can't get it again, and, that kind of a thing.
So it's an important part of the list because this is kind of a celebratory, big meal place and all that. That makes sense. Because a high-end Korean fried chicken restaurant opened in Manhattan. And
I know it's the most amazing champagne list everywhere.
500,
I haven't been there. I want to go. I mean, honestly, it sounds like, it sounds amazing.
Champagne's such a thing. All right, we're running back to our wine list. Third question. And I'm not sure, do you guys go out a lot? Because the question, not a lot, but when you can, do you go out? The question to most people, think about you're sitting with a New Yorker when these guys are off there. Favorite wine restaurant and or bar. And I ask that not for you to pick your, list it. Because if you leave someone out and you bump into the guy and he goes, why didn't you mention me on that podcast? It was the guy just asked me to name a few.
Yeah.
Is there places that do wine well? Good vibe, list is kind of cool?
It's a good question. I mean,
or maybe you don't get out that much.
We get out, some.
And again, I remind everyone we're in Eastern Tennessee, so maybe you're challenged on this.
Well, we have I can be in New York, and recently I went to New York and had a nice lunch.
Tell me that.
I was Antoine's.
Anton's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Antoine's.
that's Natalie, who used to
Anton.
work for what's his name, famous chef.
A great restaurant.
Husband and wife,
Yeah,
front,
and
back.
I love the vibe, and they have some
That's-
killer wines.
that's
on the
the
list.
right answer,
In fact,
you
we
know?
had a Barolo there that was really, really good.
Yeah.
And I mean, the prices I thought were pretty fair.
So it was
and the
fun
food
to
was
come
good.
up with a bottle.
Yeah.
Can you think of another thing like that anywhere?
Oh man,
'Cause that's
There's
a good
many,
answer.
That was a fun. I mean, a fun place. It's interesting. Like when I go out a lot, it's like New York or San Francisco
Right,
or
big city.
Chicago. Like it's often to eat and drink. So I don't want to like leave anything out.
Then let's just Anton's
yeah.
is a good
Anton's
example.
is good.
All right, here's the fourth question. The fourth question is, what is Andy's favorite all-time wine? Now, and you're the perfect person for the original question. When I structured that question, the idea was, what's the rarest, most expensive wine you ever drank? I don't care about that anymore. Here's what I care about.
Yeah.
What's that wine in your career, and we talked about it from beginning to now, that had the most influence or was transcending or, was an ooh-ah moment that clarified why you're doing this, that turned you on? Can you think of a wine or two?
I can think of a few.
Does it go back to when you and Sam were buying?
It
the
does.
first time you tasted expensive Burgundy? What can you think of?
I can think of a few instances. I will say. Early on, we were trying Burgundy and things, and chanterelles grow amazingly well here. And so we had gone on a little trail run. We'd gotten some chanterelles. We cooked them up in butter, and we said, let's try two things to see what goes with it. And we pulled a Loire, an 01 Domaine Loire that we had gotten in fairly recently then. And we had pulled also a Rioja made by Artadi, Grandes Añadas, that they made. And they were both stunning, but the Loire was, I was like, this is what Burgundy can be.
Right.
I hadn't really had that aha moment so much with Burgundy then. And so I hate that it's kind of started there, because then, Burgundy, I think, is always the search for something that amazing. I think it's one of the reasons my favorite region now is really southeastern France, because I think those wines more often deliver. They almost rarely reach the high heights that Burgundy can give you, or Burgundy-like wines.
They don't have to.
They don't have to, and 95% of the time, you're very happy with those. So these days, if you're like, grab any bottle, from the cellar to drink, it would be hard not to grab like a one of those old vine Marcous I mentioned earlier. They're so good.
Yeah,
with
that
a
makes
few
sense.
years of age, and then I also know I'm not like picking the craziest thing to pick the craziest thing.
Right. Right. Those are good answers. All right, here's the last question. Shouldn't be hard, but could be hard. The question is for you to recommend the best wine to drink around 15, 20, 22 bucks retail.
Mm-hmm.
My kids are in their late 20s, early 30s. They can't afford to go to a party or give a gift with a $40, $50 bottle of wine, but they don't want to show up with supermarket wine, 11, 12 bucks. So how do you wow in that price range? I want you to break it down by red and white. You could do category. Like Muscadet ain't a bad value for white wine for cheap. But, you give me your own suggestions.
Well, I think you almost answered it a little bit by saying that, is that anything with a bit of a story and a personal connection, I think, is always more special. It kind of eclipses a category sometimes. And so, if you've tried this Muscadet and you love it, and you bring it to your friend, say, I love this wine, I think you would love it. I think that makes a wine very special. It almost doesn't matter what it is. And so that's kind of, try a bunch of things and see what you like, and then share those, with friends. I mentioned one earlier, a Côte d'Aron from Guigal. Right. I think that's,
those are in the teens.
And they're in the teens.
Yeah. So
and,
that's
a great one.
That's the great red answer. The white answer, you alluded to stuff. Get specific.
Sure.
What would you place in that white? And again, The
Well, I
Guigal
mean-
was very specific. The white, again, could be region or, give me a
Yeah,
maker. If you
yeah.
want.
So let's see. I mean, there are really so many fun things. I mean, Domaine Thomas Sancerre. It's another
Spell
great.
Thomas.
It looks like Thomas.
Thomas. Okay. No H, Thomas, or
With an H.
THO?
With an
Okay.
H.
I never heard that one.
It's a good family owned Sancerre house, and I really love it.
And it's in that 20s?
Yeah, yeah. They have cuvées that go higher.
Yeah.
And same thing with Claude Rouffaut Sancerre. You can buy the $20. You can buy the $20 version. You can buy the $150 version. If you've never had them next to each other, you might not see the
Right.
difference.
Right. Or if you switch bottles, you may be able to drink something.
Yeah, right. You
It's
can
good.
kind of have both,
Right.
one on the side stand, sort of a thing.
Those are good.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
want
yeah.
to stretch you out. I do want to mention that we do post your answers on social media, so we make it accessible. There's a good chance some of the wines we talked about nobody heard of, and when they put it in the context of, it's great value,
Yeah.
it's not that much, and this guy who knows everything is telling me I'm going to go out and try it.
Well, let me tell you one more then, if I can.
You can't. The show's
well.
over.
I think
What
it's
is-
Commando G. The Bruja de la Rosas, I believe it's called.
Are they
The
down in
Witch's
that
Boot.
price range?
That one is, and it's great. It's like
The BRUJA,
right.
Bruja.
Yeah, it's the Witch's Boot.
And that's because we know they make some higher price, but you can get that.
You can get that.
That would be a
and
very
I've seen it all
fun-
around New York and
What's
New Orleans.
that's
and
a
stuff.
red, right?
It's a red. Yeah.
What's the blend in there?
It's Grenache.
It's 100%.
That's Grenache. Yeah.
It is. Wow.
I'm like 99% sure it's 100% Grenache. How's that?
But yeah, I mean, it's high amounts.
Yeah,
of
that's what
Grenache,
that's what the Commando G guys do.
That dominates it. That's a good one. And like I said, I'll post them all. We got to end and do a quick wrap up. But, I just thought of something. And for the 5th time, I probably said this. You're the perfect guy to ask. This place, if you come here for the first time, the idea is not for it to be intimidating. I mean, it's a very warm, open place.
Yeah.
But you walk into this incredible dining room or rooms, and there's this incredible wine program. Help me guide people how we could demystify that. And what I'm sort of pointing towards is, what should people expect, from a som? The image is this snooty guy who's pushing the more expensive wine on you. And the consumer is this uninquisitive, hey, I want to buy some wine. What do you like? I don't know.
Yeah.
So what works to get to where, it's an enjoyable, where you feel you've succeeded and the consumer's happy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I still don't know why that stereotype continues to persist. I think a lot of sommeliers are just super geeky into their craft, and they love wine, and they want you to love wine. And yeah, sometimes I think we can get out over our skis where we love wines that maybe you don't love yet in your
Riesling.
wine journey. Yeah, Riesling's a great example.
Yeah.
Maybe some of these, really light, high acid reds too. I have to constantly, remind myself and sometimes our team that, they probably want a really good Sonoma Pinot. Like they might not need or
Don't
want
talk 'em out of
Burgundy
it.
at this
Just
point,
get
even though
the
you're
right
excited.
wine.
Get them the wine they want. I think new sommeliers are really good at that because they're still excited about, wine. Like they haven't tried everything in the world yet, so they're still like on that learning curve. So I do think it is about the guests. It is about giving them what they want, reading the table, knowing if they want to talk a lot about this or if they kind of like.
What are their specific questions, to pull out of people?
If you're
red
a
or white,
consumer,
what style is
if
it
you're-
obvious?
I
is
mean,
that?
that's usually what we, like, what do you like to drink? What do you drink at home? What have you had before? Those are always good questions. Telling people, here are the kind of wines I've liked. I'd like to drink something like that. Also, we do custom pairings for guests a lot. They say, the 4 of us are eating these things. Can you pair with us? And we do that. And we don't waste your time with the kind of wines that we choose. But as a consumer, if you come in and say, I'm interested in wine, I want to talk about it, or
Be
really,
inquisitive.
Yeah, be inquisitive, ask. I think realize that the sommelier really is excited to interact with
The
you, and
opposite of
they're
that
not
old
really
image.
they're not really trying to push something. They really want to get you the right thing, but they're not mind readers,
Right.
And a lot of times we're left in the position of being mind readers, and I think we put our own likes and dislikes into that place when we don't have the information.
I agree. I think our listeners, should take heed to that. All right, we got to wrap up. I got to do a quick wrap up. I want to get some info on you. This is not a goodbye because, we're going to be continuing with other conversations. But for the Andy interview, if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. We ask you to subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your pods. If you like the podcast, leave a review. If you subscribe, Andy's podcast shows up automatically, and who would want to miss that? Follow us on Instagram at sbenruby and on X at benruby, 2 different handles, but you can find us on both with the hashtag The Grape Nation. We're on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we'll post Andy's wine list answers, and I'll even mention other wines. We had a nice discussion about Spanish and French Grenache, so we'll talk about some of those. Broadly, Andy, if people want to get more information on Blackberry Farm, Blackberry Mountain, anything Blackberry, what's the best place for them to go?
Well, I think our websites are amazing and a wealth of information. BlackberryFarm.com, BlackberryMountain.com, and you can follow us on Instagram.
Right. So on social media, Instagram is the best and largest presence. Sarah, but what's the handle? Blackberry Farm. At Blackberry Farm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then do you care if people follow you around? Do you have
that'd be fine. I post some.
Okay.
So I'm at Andy Chabot on Instagram.
That's at ANDYCHABOT.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the Blackberry site, which is broad, and then Andy, who we've spent a lot of time talking. You'll see what he's thinking and doing every day. All right. I want to thank our guest, Andy Chabot. Thank you to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. We are about to tour one of the largest wine cellars in the country, the Barn Wine Cellars at Blackberry Farm. We're going to meet the somms, explore various sections, pull some bottles, and hear their stories. I'm here with Andy Chabot, Kelly Schmidt, and John Schlickning. You know who Andy is. Kelly, just quickly tell me a little about yourself and what you do here.
Yeah, so I am the Assistant Director of Beverage for Blackberry Farm. I'm in my 13th year here, which is pretty crazy. And I do a little bit of everything. I work on the barn wine list like I'm doing actually right now. I help kind of organize and run our groups and events and their beverage programming, and then help oversee the beverage operations for the hotel.
And we walked in on you with a table of like 24 bottles that you're entering into the system. Now, John, tell me a little about yourself.
Sure. I'm one of our floor sommeliers. So I'm in the barn 5 nights a week usually. I've been here 7 years now. Started at the barn, worked my way up from like the seating and food running, and eventually was a sommelier at the barn, moved to the Dogwood, our other restaurant where I was for 4 years. Now I'm back here at the barn restaurant.
Great. Andy, where are we? We are subterranean on the property, but what's above us?
Absolutely. So we are in the lower level of the barn restaurant. The barn restaurant, it might seem common sense, but it's a barn. And it's a barn that we moved here from Pennsylvania and finished that project in about 2007. And we got a barn that's called a bank-style barn. It's built into the bank of a hill, which gives you a natural downstairs. So when you look at one side of the barn, it looks like it's 3 stories. The other side, it looks like it's 2 stories because of the bank of the hill. This was the first time we built a wine cellar with the idea it was going to be a wine cellar. Because if we go back again, this was a dry county. This was one of the first buildings that we built or moved here that we had the idea we needed a wine cellar. So we were really excited when we built this. And we were able to.
You know what I didn't ask you?
What's that?
When you and Sam, and it was over 20 years ago, actively started buying wine, Where were you storing it?
That's a good question. We kept taking over different spaces on property and
Just
adding
like random, this is a good spot, put it sideways?
Like there's a place that was the floral area. We took that over, at temperature and humidity control. So we packed wine in there. His parents' garage where we put temperature and humidity control. They wanted us out of there. So eventually we needed a real space. We have some warehouse space as well on property that we had to build. But again, we kind of took over other people's warehouse space.
I figured that.
Yeah. So we're kind of bursting at the seams. We're actually talking about a new project for the future of a wine warehouse.
We'll get to that. But Kelly, so the wine storage, was I accurate that the overall collection is upward of 150,000 bottles?
Yes.
So physically, it's stored in different locations. Andy just told us we're under the barn. Is this considered one of the main bigger storage? Or
it's considered one of the main storages in that this is where we access wines for the restaurant, for the barn.
Logically.
But I wouldn't say it's the biggest.
Okay.
We actually...
So then tell me where the other storage facilities are.
Yeah, so just down the cart path a ways is another far less beautiful as the one that we're in right now, but another
This is more of a show cellar?
Yes.
Okay.
Where we have probably about 100,000-ish bottles in that facility.
That's where, and you're always moving stuff.
Yes.
And then, John, is there any method to the madness of where and how stuff is stored? Is like all the French stuff over there? I mean, tell me how you...
I think it was at one point. But now...
What does that mean? You got lazy?
Come see.
Yeah, as we sell wine, in general, as we sell wine in any of our bins, we'll sort of empty them out, and not everything moves at the same pace. We're not selling Devasat as fast as we're selling Drouin.
Yeah.
And so we move them around. But yeah, we have our single bins right over here, which is probably the best explanation.
What does that mean? Just loose bottles? Or when you say single...
Let's
all right. Let's
take a second though and describe
the crew. We're going to start describing and walking.
Okay, so here's what we have. Our cellars are divided into sections.
Okay,
so that we can find wines. Each restaurant has single bins, just like a lot of restaurants do. A lot of times you read a wine list as the bin on it.
Right.
That's how you order it. That's where it's stored. And they have one of each of those. We have one of each bottle on the list in a single bin. And then we have warehouse storage all over property.
System for the SOM and the restaurant.
Yeah.
Not storage, but more serving.
Serving,
right.
Yeah. And then we have sections all over property. They're like 52, something like that, different sections. What you're looking at in this cellar, where all these magnums are, that section is called 48 perimeter, 48P. That's section 48 over there. So
this is a magnum section.
It is, yeah. So our SOMs every day, they take the list of sales from the night before, and they've written on it where the replacement bottle is on the property, what section it's in. And they go around to like 48P and they grab it and they put it back in its bin. So the single bins, how they're kind of set up, is it's like a Dewey Decimal System.
Right.
You have every bottle on the list has a spot, and hopefully you come downstairs and someone orders it, you pull it out. And then the next day you restock it.
Right. So it's there.
Yeah.
So Kelly, we just finished a pretty busy, important weekend, Easter, big food and wine thing. I mean, divulge it to me if you can, but I mean, how much wine are we selling this past weekend? I mean, what's moving in and out of here?
We sold out of Sancerre this weekend. I'll tell you that. I had to Monday morning come in and immediately change our by the glass Sancerre.
Is that the most popular white right now?
Right in this moment, and for the last few years, Sancerre has been hit pretty heavy. But yes, Easter was a big Sancerre.
And how many bottles are we talking about? I mean, are we talking hundreds, thousands?
I usually think in terms of years. We go through about 25,000 bottles a year.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And like you and I spoke about earlier, you're buying and holding vintages, but for more current stuff, that's the stuff you have to replenish.
Yeah. Yeah, our program is unique in that a lot of the wines that go on the list, you don't replenish those exact wines. You get one crack at them. So often,
right.
and a lot of what Kelly does, and John's great at it, selling around things, that we try not to sell out of things unless we want to sell out. We'll pull them off the list and put them in the storage. So we can have that vintage 10 years from now.
But it's rare a guest is going to see a wine and you come back and say, we don't have it. I mean, systemically, you figure.
It's rare.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Happens,
but
you get a run on something, or you did sell the last bottle yesterday, or a certain, I do it all the time. I get excited about one thing and I sell one thing, and then all of a sudden I sold us out of something.
Or that one guest comes back every year for 15 years and orders the same exact vintage, the same exact wine.
That does also happen.
all right, so I'm going to ask the three of you the same question, and I expect three different answers. The question is, I'm not going to ask you what the rarest, most expensive wine is. I'm not into that anymore. I want to know from each of you the most interesting bottle to you, what it is and why. We'll start with John.
Oh, gosh.
Put you on the spot.
No pressure.
Almost every week I find something that...
So let's talk this week or last week.
It's incredible. I've never seen it before. Recently, we have some 2002 Nyers Grenache from Hudson Vineyard.
Hudson in California,
in Carneros.
Vineyard.
Yeah.
The Nyers winery.
Yeah. When Bruce was still in charge of everything. And it's just one of these wines. It smells like rose petals and cherries and strawberries, and it's still really vibrant 22 years later. It's one of these wines that me and another sommelier, Andrew, are really excited about. And it's almost like we have to convince the guests that it's going to be really great.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
It does sound a little like you're sucking up to your boss on the Grenache thing, but we'll let that stay. All right. Kelly, I would be very disappointed in you if your selection was a Grenache, but I don't want to put any pressure on you. All right.
It's not.
Most interesting wine and why?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what John said. I feel like we open and taste really interesting things like on a Tuesday sometimes. And so just recently, Andy and I had a group here. We tasted a 1966 Loire. It was a Corton Charlemagne Loire.
We had a Corton Charlemagne at the same time, but that was Chapelle Chambertin.
Chapelle Chambertin Loire. Yeah. That was one of the most incredible wines I think I've ever.
So we know the provenance is good, right? Now, how was the wine? We're talking 66 to 2024. Fresh or oxidative?
When he poured it for me, it looked a little cloudy. I was like, what is this going to be like? It was so focused and just delicious. It really lived up to what I hoped that it would.
That's a good one. 66 Loire.
It's a great gift. Loire.
All right, Andy, you had enough time to think.
I think I just think about this one wine moment in the last couple of months when I opened a wine. I was opening a lot of great wine this night. I opened a 1996 Gaia Sori Tilden. One
of the great Barbarescos.
One of the great Barbarescos. I poured it for a wine importer friend, and I had a lot of other great wines that night. Like we had some other great Burgundy, like Rousseau and things like this.
Right.
That wine stood out as maybe one of the most stunning wines I tried in the last 16 months. I think it was really a perfect bottle, and that doesn't always happen. It was really. It was perfect.
Chops and ability to make some of the greatest wines, and that didn't disappoint.
And that didn't. And sometimes I think because the price and the history behind it, you have this different sort of idea. It's harder to sort of exceed your expectations. Right. That one exceeded my expectations.
Right. It's always nice when that happens. Can you tell me why I like Barbaresco more than Barolo? Because I do.
I probably can't tell you, but I think usually
I'm sure your answer will be correct. Why do I like Barbaresco more than Barolo?
I think Barbaresco is usually just a little
softer,
a little more perfumed. Maybe not trying so hard,
right?
As a wine,
easy to drink, not in an unevolved way, because it's a very evolved
It's
wine.
very elegant, but I've tried Barolo and Barbaresco next to each other and gotten which one was which wrong before. But I think generally the people that make Barbaresco make a certain style. And I've never known, is it that's what grows there, or that's how you're supposed to make it when you make wine there?
Right.
Who knows? Who knows?
Whenever I drink both, and I love both, but I'm obviously leaning towards, is the alcohol different in Barolo than Barbaresco? It always seems a little, not hotter, but...
In Barolo than Barbaresco?
Yeah. Or not really?
Not really,
Okay.
not these
So
days.
me.
I mean,
I
don't want to like lean back on like legal, term. You probably know better than I do. If there's a legal difference that the minimum alcohol, but I don't think so. And these days it's warmer and such. But I think some of the expositions and such in Barolo lend themselves to bigger, more powerful, wines.
All right, should we stroll?
Yeah, we should stroll.
Stroll and talk. Talk.
As we stroll and talk, I just want to talk about two things. As we're going through the cellar. So you dined in the barn last night.
Yes.
Where the fireplace
Right above here,
yeah.
right?
So when we were building the barn or rebuilding it here, there were two times that Sam and his wife Marisol stopped construction. One time was the barn, that fireplace, which is a big stone fireplace, was going to be in the middle of the dining room, but they moved it to the edge of the dining room where you saw it last night. So I'm sure the mason enjoyed that process. Another time they stopped construction, and the construction company was like, "Man, we have a deadline." Because Blackberry had a deadline because we had an event set up with Harlan and Screaming Eagle and Thomas Keller. And we're going to open the barn with this great big event. We had it on the calendar.
Just your average event.
Just your average event.
All right.
Those connections Sam had made, But Sam said, then we have to stop again. When we built the barn, we built the farmhouse, which is next door. It's an accommodation. We built the larder where we make cheese and jam and charcuterie. Separate building. But we didn't build a fourth building at that time. We wanted to wait and see what we needed. But Sam said, whatever we're going to build, one day we're going to build a tunnel to it. So we have to stop construction and put a header in the basement so that one day we can build a tunnel.
Was that out of regulatory reasons or just logical?
He just wanted to make sure we could build a tunnel, so we needed to support the basement.
Right.
And so they did that. They were kind of frustrated, I think, at the stop and go nature of the program. But we built Bramble Hall, finished in 2016, and we built the tunnel. And Sam got to see, the tunnel constructed. Unfortunately, he passed away in early 2016. We completed the tunnel unexpectedly in a skiing accident. We completed the tunnel later in 2016. He got to see the construction, not the finished product. But I think we've done him proud, and you'll see here as we go through.
Right.
So kind of looks like his back door.
Right, so we're leaving the sort of, when you walk in, the Magnum area, and now we're moving into different rooms.
Yeah, this room we call the Chapoutier room. Interesting. There used to be a ton of Michel Chapoutier wines stacked in here. Back before there was a
lot
door.
Of this Chapoutier?
Not anymore. We'll see it later.
Okay.
We moved it.
All right. So now
this way, yeah.
Kelly opened a door. We're going through a tunnelway to a kind of modern, beautiful room with tons of boxes and, little squares with wine. So it's a long rectangular room. What are we looking at?
Sure. So as the hallway widened as we stepped into the full tunnel. We stepped outside of the barn.
Right.
And we're now
So we're not under the barn.
Not under the barn anymore. Yeah.
So this is a sub, you may control temperature, but there's a natural
your feet
extent
are 18 feet below ground, I think.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, on either side, long hallway on either side, wooden boxes with concrete bins below. The concrete helps retain temperature as well. These are multi-purpose spaces for us. We use them for receptions. We've done fashion shows down here.
Yeah, it's a good runway. So are wines in the boxes because these are things you're not going to get to right away, or it's just one way to store them?
It's a little more common sense. Yeah, it's one way to store them. Although this is a nice looking space, I think of this as an extension of our warehouse spaces. So these are wines. Yes, they're on the list, but this isn't where we come and grab them. There's one bottle in the cellar, then this is long-term storage of these wines. And if they come in wooden boxes, we often keep them in wooden boxes. It gives us great storage and height.
Yeah.
As you see, we're growing. we're like goldfish. You give us a bigger bowl, we grow bigger. So that's what we do.
It's, I think, really neat too, because for so long, a lot of these wooden boxes were in the warehouse storage that I referred to previously.
Right.
And so guests really didn't see them. But it's such a, you'll lead tours through here, and it's such a cool thing for guests to walk through here and sort of point out, oh, I love that wine, or oh, I've always wanted to try that wine. It's added this whole other element where you can actually enjoy the boxes.
So, in staring at one part of the wall, I'm seeing a lot of Christoph Baron, the interesting stuff, the ore category, the horsepower, which is all, farmed by horses. I'm seeing a lot of the classic Rhone wines we talked about, North and South, Guigal, Pigal, American guys, Hobbs. Let's walk down a little more. I'm starting to see some Barolos, more Cayuse. Is there any, is La Flave, is there any, again, method to the madness of how this stuff is stored? Like when you come in here?
I like to say this is organized to catch your eye.
Okay. All right.
But in general, the left side of this tunnel is one zone, the right side is another. So during our restock period in the afternoon, we know generally where something might be, but not exactly.
Okay. Here's the Genasse we talked about earlier. I see a lot of Cayuse.
His wines come in wooden boxes, so it's
so
interesting.
That's one of the reasons I'm seeing them, just because that's the way they're shipped, and that's the way. There's as much others, here's Fantodi, tons of it, and all of that.
But you asked the question: is there a rhyme or a method to this madness? It is kind of common sense that when these wines came in, we had this space, and that's where we stored it.
Okay,
and that's that.
So that's
It's sort of like.
All right, so we're kind of leaving this corridor. There's an adjoining, little table, tasting table. I'm guessing this is the spirits part. Is this not the only spirits part, right?
Or this is all that you will love the bars, and this is probably what you will see. As I mentioned, we have things tucked away,
Yeah, so I'm staring at rows of Pappy Van Winkle, 23s, 15s, 20s, the 12 Van Winkles. There's the High West Distillery, Stag. This is craziness right here.
John, you can tell.
Then Scotch on the bottom.
Yeah. So some of these scotches are part of our bar storage, as well as the Buffalo Trace Experimental. So if one of those gets sold, the bartender will run down here and grab it. But yeah, American whiskey on the left, Scotch on the right. I like to call this our decorative storage. Although we're starting to get, there's a little tequila on top. So.
Is that... Andy, you and I were talking about shifts in taste and trends. Is tequila something you need to not up your game, but be part of the game, right?
You have to. Yes. Yeah, you have to be in the tequila game. It's hugely popular. And
are you at the mezcal point yet, or
we've been in the mezcal point for a long time?
Okay,
early adopters.
That's true.
That doesn't surprise me.
But it's amazing the knowledge that guests have and the experience that they have with mezcal and tequila.
Yeah. I have so many friends that think Blue Label is the end all, and all this stuff. They have no idea. What's so special about that particular bottle?
Sure. That's even a crazier Blue Label, because that's Blue Label George V. Which was an anniversary release, if I'm not mistaken. And then it was only distilleries that were open during the reign of George V. So it includes some distilleries.
It's
wild, yeah. It includes some distilleries that later closed down, that they call ghost distilleries. And so it was sort of the beginning of Johnny Walker really taking advantage of their stocks in a more meaningful way.
So everything I'm looking at is basically bar, restaurant, by the glass serving, right?
For the most part, we also use this space daily. We use it for whiskey tastings for our guests.
Which is a big part of the program. You have different levels, Scotch, bourbon, you offer different, presentation. All right, so we're going to leave the...
This is called the grain bin.
So this is the grain bin. This is one of the few places that has skylight lighting. Everything is,
The little building in the middle of the barn, circle parking lot. That's what this is.
And this is that connector thing that Sam, this is
But this is the tunnel.
The tunnel, yeah.
Still the tunnel.
Okay.
And this is actually, although it's an amazing room, it's also the fire escape. That's why it had to exist.
Right.
With this, such a long tunnel.
So you run here and run out.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bells.
Right.
They always make, take opportunities like this and make something amazing. So they made this amazing space out of the need for a fire escape, which I think is stunning.
Yeah, it's great. All right, so we're leaving the spirits area, and we are walking into another long, gorgeous cellar, subterranean with box storage and these concrete. So, what's going on in here?
Sure. Similarities to the previous space. You'll still see Janas,
Right.
Laflave. We have some Helen Keplinger, some for
Those are
9
like
liters.
3 liter. Is that a 9?
I think it might. We definitely have 9s. Yeah.
That's a 9?
Yeah.
Andy, Keplinger's making some Rhone style wines,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
Yeah,
she is.
But she didn't always do that, or she did, but she also makes whites and cabs and
when
all
she made
that.
wine in the Priorat for a while, she made what's the cab? Grace. She's the winemaker. Grace.
Right.
Is
The Grace family.
Grace family, great Cabernet. She's an amazing Cabernet producer, but also great with her own varieties.
So I'm looking at Andy's
that's that old-
recommendation
yeah,
of
that's that old
Marco, a lot of Laflave.
And then all that Chapoutier. Remember I said the Chapoutier room?
Yes.
This was all stored in that room, and we moved it here.
Wow, look at all that.
Yeah.
Hermitage Blanc.
Yeah.
La
He's a-
Barrière.
Chapoutier and Chave are kind of the competing Northern Rhone
Yeah.
top producer.
And the
type of people.
whites are more rare and sought after and
Yeah.
even expensive in that sense,
I
right?
love them, personally. We're supposed to pick bottles at some point, guys. But we can do that.
Well, as we walk back, we could do
Yeah.
that.
Just remember.
So a lot of Rhone here.
Yeah, there is. There's kind of like...
Yeah, this is pretty much a Rhone. I just had this at a tasting. This is a Priorat,
Yeah.
right? A Grenache base.
Yeah.
Showed
Person
pretty
that
well.
makes Finca Dauphine.
Oh, is that? Okay.
It's that one, Alvaro Palacios.
All right.
He has Romita, too, which is a...
Right.
So this now is the basement of Bramble Hall. So we go up these stairs.
So there's the barn we were under. There's like kind of a courtyard, drive around, little larders on one end. And on the other end is the Bramble, of which we've traveled underground from one building to another with connecting.
Exactly.
All right, we're going up a couple of steps.
Super secret VIP.
Jesus Christ, this doesn't end.
We do concerts and things in Bramble Hall, and like the band will have a dinner in the cellar and then come through the tunnel and go upstairs, kind of the secret.
Are those real hams
These are
or
real
show
hams.
hams?
No, these are real. These and then these
Yeah, I see them.
they're real Chino style hams. Then we have some culatella.
Ah, look at that, yeah. So there's meats drying in the cellar too. There's some magnums and 3 liters and all of that.
Focus on
Andy,
them.
this is pretty impressive. This is a lot of Reyes. All right, so I'm looking down the steps and all the way across. This is like a half a mile corridor we've gone through. All right, and now
we were talking before.
oh, I totally lost my bearings.
This room is called the Keep.
Okay.
What we're doing, we're keeping a lot of wines for the future. So we built this tasting room and that separate cellar where we keep some of our more age-worthy blue chip style, wines.
So these are the wines you're not pulling out as quickly. You're trying to hold them.
Yeah, and it's at least a physical representation of that idea. We have so much wine that we're trying to do that with that we couldn't put it all in here. But these are wines in that category. Gaia, Loire,
Right.
Erasmus, John Albin,
Right.
Saban, and then of course DRC and Domaine Lafleve and things like that.
Right. All right, we just finished our walking tour of the Blackberry Farm wine cellars, an extensive, physical architectural layout. And now we're sitting down after Andy, Kelly, and John pulled bottles that we're going to taste and talk about. And they were pulled specifically, because of what they mean to these guys now and the program and all of that. So we'll talk about that. And then, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. When we sit down with our chefs, we are going to taste these wines, and do the food and wine pairing comparison and discuss that dynamic. Now we're just, talking about the wines, which will be a good lead-in to the food thing, so we won't have to. So who wants to start? Who wants to pour the first wine?
I can start.
Go ahead. So Kelly,
Start with my white.
Your first white is?
So my first white, I chose Pierre Vincent Girardin's 2021 Pullini Montrachet.
All right, so a couple of quick questions. 21 vintage in white Burgundy was good?
Was good.
Okay.
In a string of warmer vintages of Burgundy. But overall, I think that
21 was a warmer vintage?
looking back on it, kind of in a string of vintages that were just generally warmer than vintages in the past. But I was in Burgundy last year and actually visited with Pierre Girardin, and he looked back really fondly. Even though at the time they had a lot of worries about the 21 vintage, he was really excited about how the wines were tasting, and especially his whites from 21.
Right. So this is Pullini Montrachet.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so I suck at descriptors. Does Pullini Montrachet sort of have their own characteristic descriptors, or does it vary by maker? Or it's a Pullini? What are those? Let's put our schnozzle in the glass.
I like that schnozzle. To me, Pullini definitely has its own style, and it's a more kind of opulent, giving white Burgundy style. What I particularly like about Pierre Girardin's wines, he's the son of the very, very famous Vincent Girardin. He's a young man making really, really incredible wine, I think. What I like about his wines is they're very clean and polished white Burgundies while still feeling like you can tell where they're from. So do have some oak influence, do have some riper, richer quality, but still also classic white Burgundy.
So can I ask you two things? I feel a nice feel of acidity.
Absolutely.
It's definitely there, which makes it a great food wine. I don't have any other word, but there's like a teeny petrol tint to it. That's from it's a little oxidative or
a little reductive.
Reduction.
A little reductive.
That's the difference,
Yeah.
right? Which is very interesting. I mean, the nose is gorgeous and complex, right?
Yeah.
Very white Burgundy.
Yeah.
Very classic. I think you picked this too for a couple reasons. One, like Cassidy, the chef of the barn, loves white Burgundy.
Yes. So.
But that's because she's fancy.
Well,
right?
she's both. She's kind of both. But knowing that you're going to taste one of Cassidy's dishes and knowing the style of her cuisine and what it goes well with.
The match is kind of perfect.
It's going to be
more
perfect.
than just, it's a whole soulful match.
Yes.
Her likings, her cooking.
Do chefs make food that go with the wines that they like?
Right.
Is the question.
Yeah.
And I picked something that's on the other side of that spectrum.
It's true.
All right, so
do you want to do white red that way, or
whatever you
Want to go through all the whites and then.
What do you think is best?
do that?
Let's do the whites first.
All right, we're moving to the next wine, not diminishing any wine. We have 6 wines, so we don't. All right, so this is, whose wine is this?
This is mine.
All right.
John, this is 2019 Achendo Cellars Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay. So
And-
a little history about Achendo. It's the Arajo family.
Yes, Arajo family sold in 2012. Isley Vineyard, where they've been based for 30 years, and immediately started a new project.
Right.
And instead of being so focused on one site, they focused on the whole valley, and sort of creating complexity through different vineyard sites. And this wine, for me, I'll have people pour it as I talk. In 2019, I was able to do the Sam Bell Fellowship through Blackberry Farm, and in honor of Sam, I spent a month sort of following his path that led him back to Blackberry Farm.
Cool.
I spent a month in California, 2 weeks in Colorado. 2 weeks in Colorado, and then a month in New York City, staging in amazing restaurants and hotels. And while I was there, I gained this sort of much, probably past due appreciation for the great Sauvignon Blancs of the Napa Valley. And the flexibility that these winemakers have to sort of just experiment and create like beautiful wine.
So I don't drink a lot of Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc, and I know for years a lot of the great makers have been making it. It's kind of like a passion project, or
Absolutely.
they make a fraction of it compared to their other stuff, but they're interested in it. This is a silly question because I kind of know the answer, but every winemaker has their style, so you could differ. But does Napa Sauvignon Blanc have a style? Does it tend to be like the cabs used to be, big and fruity, unctuous? I mean, or does it really vary by maker?
What I heard while I was out there is that we talked, like you mentioned, the experimentation that's possible. Like they're able to use it as this blueprint or this first step before they go into the red wines, because the red wines are so established. And the white wines, they can use concrete egg, they can use ceramic, they can use neutral oak, Austrian oak, like sort of stainless steel, anything they want, and sort of blend it together to create this really like nuanced description. Like it's not as like structured as Bordeaux Blanc. They're sort of, I think they're really establishing their own style right now. Like it's recently been coined the Super Sauvignon Blanc. Like producers
So
buy
Bordeaux
it.
Blanc, they put a little Semillon in. Do these guys ever put in, or it's mostly all?
Some producers do, but it's
in California.
It's more Sauvignon Musqué.
okay, yeah.
Different Napa. Like the Isley Vineyard had Musqué, and they used to make Sauvignon Blanc.
Bedrock's also using Musqué,
And that gives it that like tropical kind of quality.
Yeah.
So this has that Sauvignon Blanc nose,
This is
grassy, grapefruity, what you had just said, but it's super elegant.
Yeah, this is
and
very
integrated.
regal.
It's not like, oh, this is grapefruity or this is grassy. It's really the best element.
Yeah, I do find there's more akin to Bordeaux white than say Sancerre or
Certainly the
New
mouthfeel.
Zealand or what have
The
you.
mouthfeel is not rich, but it's like medium plus, or
Absolutely.
it captivates your mouth. I don't think I've ever had this. It's beautiful.
It's a lovely one.
It really is.
And the bottle age too, like that's one of the best parts of
What
it.
vintage is it?
19.
Was 19, I know 18 was good in Napa, 19 good,
Still drought.
not as good as
so-
18.
But it was a good year.
Yeah, good year.
Classic year.
And I know 20 was fires everywhere. Did 19 have isolated fires or no?
No, 17 and 20 did, from my understanding. I mean, there might have been fires, and there's nothing that affected
Napa.
wine.
All right, so we're doing 3 whites in a row. That was Kelly's idea. Anyone has any complaints, complain to her.
Come to me.
Kelly has great ideas. Okay, so we're pouring
You
now.
know what? I think it was the right idea.
I think so.
All right, this is
Okay, so now this is Viognier.
the Andy Chabot selection. Ooh, I'm so surprised it's a wine from the Rhone.
Well, no one else did it.
Right? Okay.
It's also, so Viognier, I think, is a very polarizing grape for a lot of people. This is a great
Why?
because it's floral.
Right. The aromatics are crazy.
Aromatics are out of control.
Like too florally, where people are like, this is what.
Sometimes, or it tricks your brain into thinking it's going to be sweet. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
make bad, I hate to say it that way. It's hard to make a great Viognier. It's easy to let Viognier get very full-blown and out of control. This particular one comes from the region in France that the grape comes from, which is Condrieu. And this is a bottling from Guy Gall, who we talked about earlier, called the La Dorian, which is it's a blend of vineyards, some of the best vineyards in Condrieu. And I think it's a very great version of Viognier, but on the kind of outgoing, charismatic side. It's floral, it's powerful, You notice if you have this right after these other two, the acidity's lower. But I think it's a really applicable pairing wine. I also know Cassidy doesn't love Viognier. I've tried.
This is true.
I've tried. She loves white Burgundy. She doesn't love Viognier. So I'm going to be very interested to see later when we try it with these two wines or these three wines.
So to me, sometimes the nose is so prominent.
Yeah.
With the palate is as prominent as the nose. I mean, it almost carries through. I mean, if you love this nose, you'll love this palate. You know, because the palate is not a shadow of the nose. It's like full bore in a good way on the nose and in the palate.
Yeah,
you know,
you get that full-on lychee fruit.
Oh, the lychee, the tropical. It's it's so exotic. This wine.
It is, but it's also dry. And for Viognier, it has acidity.
It is dry. It's got a nice mouthfeel. And now we turn to Kelly, and we ask Kelly, "What do you think of this?"
Ugh. What do I think of La Dorian by Guigal? I think it's
not your thing.
No, I think it's an absolutely beautiful wine. I think it's truly one of the great wines of the world. What's really funny about being a somm at Blackberry Farm is this wine, a wine coming from Condrieu, that's a fairly rare thing.
Yeah.
Condrieu is a really small place and they only make so much wine, and these producers that make it at the very, top of the game, there's only so much of that wine to go around.
Right.
Our somms are so lucky to taste as much Condrieu as they do. It's almost a little bit silly.
So 2 questions to all those points. Is this one of the best examples?
I think so.
Like when you talk about Hermitage Blanc and you say Chavillon, right? Is this, that in Condro?
This in Vernet and this sherry. This Vernet and sherry, I think, are the top 3.
And because of everything we just said, is this a very expensive wine, or because it's Condro and Viognier? For Condro and Viognier,
I don't know exactly. This is brand new vintage. It's a 22, by the way.
Okay, so this is an exceptional wine, not overpriced. You pay for it being exceptional, and you drink these kind of wines, small, for the right, occasion thing and all that. Exactly. It's tremendous.
Not for everybody.
So I don't drink a lot of Viognier. I'm not going to lie. This is the best Viognier I've ever had. Period. Okay.
Pretty good one. Yeah.
All right. So we finished our flight of whites. Pretty good variety. Burgundy, a California Sauvignon Blanc, and then a Viognier from Condro. That's 3 wines. We're now going to move into 3 red wines. So we're with Kelly, John, and Andy. They each picked 1 red, 1 white. So now we're going to taste the red.
I'm excited about this wine, John.
I'm excited about this wine too.
It's off the beaten path.
Now, John, I asked Andy, and I think I caught him in a moment where he didn't know.
Sure did.
It's like, do I tell anyone this? Or do I'm like, screw it, I'm telling everyone.
I just asked John, I said, do you know what the hell?
I said, is this Zena Marvo or whatever it is? What's the red grape in this?
Liatico and
Spelled.
Liatiko.
Liatico. And that's the red wine grape. Is this 100% Liatico?
No, it's a blend of Liatico and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Mendilaria. Mendilaria.
So first, I want to thank you for picking an interesting wine like this, a Greek wine. They're all interesting, but we'll all agree this is kind of an outlier as far as the group. All right, so tell me about the wine.
Yeah, we're not all just the classic wines of the world, although Economo is becoming a classic wine. I'm sure you've met Dionysius, who just
Yeah. Andy and I talked a little about him.
And I mean, I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I started at Blackberry Farm, so sort of every day since then has been a learning opportunity. But this is imported by a dear, dear friend of ours, Todd Mathis of DNS Wines, through his relationship with Dionysius. And this is...
Does he specialize in Greek, or he's all over?
Dionysius did. And so their collaboration has opened his portfolio to all these amazing Greek wines. that I had only really just heard of. I'd had a little bit before coming here, but really just heard of.
I'll tell you, if I can, a quick story.
Sure, go ahead.
We talked about this some, that we didn't have any Greek wine in our list until 6 years ago, something like that. And Todd and I were at a food and wine event together, and he brought these new Greek wines in his portfolio, and we tasted them. And I kind of like hung my head, and I said, "Damn it, Todd." He goes, "What? You don't like them?" I said, "No. Now we have to have a Greek section on our list because they were so
But that's a perfect example of you taste wines all the time. You tasted something that you knew was different and interesting, but was so good. Why wouldn't you have it?
Exactly. It was sort of like, these are classics, or they are about to be. I mean, Greece is the oldest place in the world for wine.
So you and I talked about this during the interview. You know, we talked about what you need to have on the list, what consumers pull for. What happens when you get this wine? You now have it in the cellar. Your guys are on the floor. You wait for the right opportunity to recommend. Like it's not your goal to push it. Like Andy doesn't have a meeting and say, "I need to sell 6 bottles of this." The time comes when people make inquiries, like, "I want to try something new or funky or this."
Exactly.
That's when you.
Exactly.
And the response?
It's usually pretty great.
I like that. Continue to like that one.
Yeah, it has elements of like the warmth you feel with that like sort of almost like coppery, irony quality.
Yeah, definitely in there.
But then it has that really like bright fruit. Like it's almost
the fruit
like
is forward. It's not a fruity wine, but the fruit plays.
There.
Yeah.
And you also lift like a little.
And the label, I love that label. That's a cool label, you know.
It has changed over the years.
Yeah. All right, so that's out of the chute with a Greek red.
Me first.
Liaco?
Me first.
We don't speak Greek, so.
All right, so this next wine is Andy's wine. This is a bit of a treat. So this is Andy, you tell us what this is.
Yeah, so this is Domaine des Tours. So this is a wine in the Reyes family, I think, is maybe the place to start. That you can always sort of tell with these triangle neck labels that they have. They sort of stand out. Domaine des Tours is Emmanuel Reynaud's winery. Emmanuel Reynaud owns and runs Chateau Reyes now. He took over from his uncle, but he already had Domaine des Tours. So it's a separate estate. This is a Vin de Pays de Vaucluse, so it's not Chateauneuf. It's not exactly Côte de Rhône either. It's sort of a large appellation wine. It's based on Grenache, but there's other grapes. But I think this will go well with the food we're going to try later.
What's the vintage year?
07.
So the nose represents, a little older wine.
Interestingly, I think it really represents this winery. We're going to try a lot of.
All right, so you would know better than me. I mean, it's the most aged wine we've tasted.
Yeah.
So a little of that would show, but the characteristic and qualities of this winery, you would know is there.
Yeah, and I think it always shows a little of that evolved rose petal.
Yeah, I was going to say perfumey in a floral sense. These wines always seem to me.
It's like gaminess, and I think they also hold them back before they release them. Not current Detour release, but it's not what most people would consider a young one.
Might be 16.
Something like
Yeah.
that. But I really like it. I think it also has that tomato quality to it.
Yeah,
like a good vegetal.
Yeah.
But red tomato.
Yeah, like you get with some Sangiovese.
So is that tomato in the nose or in the palate or both?
I smell it like tomato leaf on the nose. It's kind of like a
tomato leaf has a very prominent,
like when you crush a tomato leaf or something.
Yeah.
And
then the palate.
Like black tea.
Yeah. Black tea. There's that garrigue, that kind of southern French kind of quality to it. And, lavender and herbs and garlic and all the things you think. I really think this is more this is a wine that you would have with food often.
It's very nuanced, but not in your face on any one thing.
We'll see. I bet it will really.
There's a lot going on there, but it's not like the tomatoes or.
I bet it will really wrap its arms around food. But I do think it really smells like a wine made by Emmanuel right now. Yeah. It tastes that way too. It's like very noticeable. I can't exactly describe that, but I think he makes all smell and taste.
In a complimentary way, you would know better than all of us, right? I mean, in a good way.
That's true. You say that. My wife also knows these wines. I one time blinded her. This was years ago on a wine. We actually came and stayed at Blackberry, and I got a bottle. I think it might have been this exact bottle. I got it delivered to the room, and I poured a glass. I gave it to her. I said, "Try this." She tried it. She goes, "Is this a Reyes wine?" Whether or not that means she's had a lot of them or that they're just that particular, it's hard to exactly tell.
They are so distinctive.
They are.
I think it's that Sarah's that good.
Yeah, it's that
That's
good.
my vote.
Yeah, it wasn't a good guess. Right?
Got some good ones too.
Jesus, so you're torturing your wife by making her drink Reyes or
Detour. We don't drink a lot of Reyes.
Yeah.
We don't drink a lot of Reyes.
So tell me one last thing before we talk about the Hirsch. Take similar vintages of Detour and of Reyes. I'm asking you this because I don't know and I don't drink them, but what are the characteristics, similarities, and differences that are noticed, or are they?
It's a really good question, and you almost have to have them next to each other to really know, I think. I always find, when I've gotten into the Reyes to be more pristine, a little more pure. Reyes is all Grenache, and it has the Grenache Peluda, the certain clone of Grenache in it. And I think Reyes is very sort of, it's clean, has great fruit, and doesn't quite show, you mentioned that age quality, doesn't quite show the age quite as much. I find these wines to be a little gamier, a little more obviously Southern French, in that sort of Mediterranean.
Is rustic a word or no?
Rustic's a good word.
It is.
Rustic's a good word.
So gamey, more representative of the region.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But still with that fingerprint of, I don't know what it is, the barrels, the winemaker, there's something. He used to get his barrels from Reyes, and Reyes got them used, kind of a thing.
All right, so that was a treat. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
and
that was
our
fun.
last wine is a wine that's been around, but really is more than hitting its stride, and that's
14?
Yeah.
Hirsch Vineyards Pinot Noir. Who's the dad? Was it David Hirsch?
Mm-hmm.
Jasmine's dad
Yeah.
has kind of turned the reins over to Jasmine, and she's been doing a great job
She's
making
crushing it. She's
wine
amazing.
and as an ambassador and all of that. And arguably one of the most spectacular properties, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you look at overlooking the fog and.
I think.
All right, so this is. Tell me what this is.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're drinking Hirsch Vineyards Pinot Noir. This is the San Andreas Fault bottling, Sonoma Coast, West Sonoma Coast now. But this is the 2014, so it's got 10 years of age on it, which I think is really kind of fun.
Doesn't show.
Yeah.
It's
These wines are so fresh all the time.
I was about to say, it sets apart from the things that we just tasted, right? It's like,
Yeah, there's definitely similarity to those, that Mediterranean kind of slight oxidative quality,
but this like,
So 14, who's making 14?
Oh, that's such a good question. Is it still Ross Cobb? No.
I think about
Yeah.
that.
So Jasmine was on the show, the podcast, like 4 years ago, and then she was doing everything, but to the extent of what's going on now, she's really hit her stride. I've asked her to come back on, but I want to do a one-on-one with her in New York, so I'm waiting to hear, but there's a lot to talk about because of what she's done.
Yeah. Well, we make a wine for Blackberry Mountain with her. Our house Pinot Noir is a Hirsch Pinot Noir. And I've gotten to know her well through that process. And I mean, she really is amazing. It's come into her own and really knows her vineyard, her spot there. And
She's very dedicated to all that. So This shows this is a young wine for a 10-year-old wine. Do you agree?
Isn't it?
I do.
I mean, the fruit is very fresh.
It's juicy
It's
cherry
an
fruit.
elegant, but elegant.
If you put that in front of me, I'd say it's 22.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's fresh,
maybe
but-
3 years back or whatever. What's the vineyard designate on this one?
It's San Andreas, yes.
San Andreas.
Which is a blended one.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap up, but any final comments on any wines individually or any as the group? Does anybody have any final say? All right, so just to tip off, we tasted 3 reds, 3 whites. We talked about them specifically. We are going to grab these wines and we are going to do another segment where we are going to pair these wines with food. And, the chefs are aware of what we're doing, and we're going to discuss why wine and food pair, why these wines and food pair, and kind of give you some tips and why everything works. So when we come back, we're going to be sitting with chefs, somms, and food. Boatload of food and a boatload of wine.
Have fun.
Anybody complaining?
No, that's what it's all about.
All right. So that concludes our cellar tour and taste. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am sitting down, or actually I'm standing now, with the chefs and somms at Blackberry Farm to do a segment I like to call a feast for your ears. This is an olfactory and gustatory adventure. How do you like those big words? Our experts, and I will introduce them in a minute, are going to teach us and discuss some great wine and food pairings and why they work. So just to set things up, we have our chefs from Blackberry Farm, Cassidy Dabney and Trevor Iaconis. Cassidy is the executive chef at the barn at Blackberry Farm. She's a graduate of New England Culinary Institute, cut her teeth at the Four Seasons Hotel, and joined Blackberry Farm in 2010, rising to executive chef in 2015. Cassidy's team prepares beautifully served multi-course menus of the farm's signature's foothill cuisine, inspired by seasonal farm fresh products and produce grown in a garden a short walk from the barn. Trevor Iaconis jumped into the business at the age of 14. He graduated from the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park in New York in 2011. He came right over to Blackberry Farm as an intern, moved up the ranks, and was recently appointed executive chef at the Dogwood at Blackberry Farm. Trevor's menu focuses on wellness-minded dishes, utilizing seasonal produce, and sharing big, bold flavors. Was that an accurate introduction? Did I miss anything?
I feel pretty good about it. It feels pretty good. Yeah.
All right, so very good. So those are your peeps. They're right in front of me, right by the stoves. To my right, you know Andy and you know Kelly. We sat down with them earlier. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to cook and create these meals, and we're going to pair wines to them, and we're going to talk about, how we're making this, why these wines go well, what works with what, so it'll be a big interaction. All right? So where do we want to start? Do we start by pouring a glass of wine?
Yeah, I think wine might help everybody out. Let's do that.
Kelly, why don't you...
let's get some wine.
Why don't you get some wine out there? And so are we going to get cooking now?
Okay, I want to cook first.
Okay. Go ahead.
I want to cook first. Okay, I'm going to cook trout.
Okay.
And it's going to be great. So
Kelly, you're making a trout.
Cassidy,
not Kelly.
Yeah, no.
Kelly's pouring the wine. So Cassidy, you're making trout. What's the preparation?
All right, so this is kind of a fun and easy preparation, something that people can do at home. It's sunburst trout from Sunburst Trout Farm in North Carolina. I have, at this point, removed the skin from the trout fillets, and I now have, would you call that an overly generous amount of butter?
Well, I thought it was like 2 chunks of foie gras or something.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I'm going to throw this in the oven and then chat about it a little bit more.
Okay.
Because all we have to do now is cook it to the done.
So you have these beautiful fillets.
Beautiful fillets.
Like pinkish salmon.
Where do you get them,
with
Cassidy?
2 wads of butter. So you want that thing coming swimming out butter.
It's basically, it's getting almost confit in butter.
Okay.
These are from Sunburst Trout Farm in North Carolina, and it's just the best little trout farm we have nearby. And honestly, I think possibly the country. But I do want to talk about this butter we have all over the trout. Okay, so we've taken the butter to almost black. All of those little bits in there are just getting a little bit crunchy. They're getting a little bit bitter. They're getting really nutty. And then we throw in a whole bunch of Dijon, and it kind of all fries together and makes this caramelized butter and Dijon deliciousness.
Tell me what the bits are. I mean, what are they?
They're just milk solids.
Yeah, protein.
They are the milk solids. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then how are we going to do this? Are we going to cook one meal through?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
all right. So, I think that makes sense, Andy.
Well,
so,
I can get going on the other parts.
You might as well. So, the first wine we poured, and so Kelly, let's talk about what we poured. And the big question here is the why. You know, why are we drinking this wine with a trout fillet, which has a little color, and tons of butter. You know, it's not like a flounder fluke, or it's got a little more character.
Earthiness.
Yeah, so we've started back with the Achendo Cellar Sauvignon Blanc that we tasted earlier. We kind of purposely, all three of the whites that we tasted earlier and that we chose for this are all very different and are all going to, add to pairings in a very different way. I'm really interested to see what we think of the three wines, starting with the Achendo, but what we think of how they pair with Cassidy's dish.
Okay. So just a rule of rules. When the food is done, we will have approach drinking all the wines, and we will evaluate of the three whites what we think
Yeah, and I think
is
we
the
also
best pairing, or maybe all of them.
I think we also try the others. I think in the name of science, we should try them.
Okay, so wait.
If
For
we need more
all
glasses,
of
we can.
Cassidy's dishes, we're drinking 6 wines?
Tasting.
Tasting.
We're tasting
Is
6
that what
wines.
you call it?
Yeah, we call it
Yeah.
tasting.
With a
And
wing.
then,
With a big old wing.
then wait, Trevor starts cooking his food and we drink the 6 wines over again?
Yes.
All right, is there any way to get like a
When
third
do I
chef
take
in
my
here?
nap?
Let's have a
Taste
party.
the
You know
6
what I'm
wines.
saying?
Okay.
Sometimes you have to run it back.
All right, so we have the trout in the oven with
Trout's
a
in the
big
oven.
glob of butter. You have
I
a tray
have
of...
yummy stuff. So here I have some grilled spring onions. It's spring onion season. These are Vidalias coming out of Georgia. We have some grilled oyster mushrooms. These are coming from some interesting mushroom farmers we have nearby. And they throw, I'm going to go out on a limb and say all sorts of mushrooms. You know what I mean? They're weirdos.
You're sauteing them, were they pre-grilled on purpose?
Yeah, they're
for
pretty
that?
on purpose because we don't have a grill over here.
But you could have just sauteed them. What I'm saying is the process is grill, saute.
Grill saute. Yeah, you're going to want that smokiness on this stuff. I know a lot of us here like to pair this one with a little bit of red too sometimes. How's this stove work? Can you guys smell that?
Not yet.
It's very hot.
All right, let's get this butter. You know what this
So Cassidy is that the same butter as
Yeah.
the is this a side dish or is this like poured on top of the fish?
This is part of the entree.
This is
It's
part of the entree, yeah.
So it's
Okay.
a composed entree dish that you're doing.
All right, so
I think one of the hard
Andy, we got to
things-
start drinking
Yeah.
more wine.
Well, I think one of the hard things about pairing is that, there's all these different flavors in a dish, right? And something that goes well with one component might not go well with another component.
Right.
And that's, I think, we'll see that here as we taste these wines with this dish. Nothing is going to be perfect, or maybe some will be perfect, but I think we're going to come to sort of like a consensus, or you might come to your own personal consensus as to what actually works best with the dish as a whole. But a lot of times we think something's going to be great, then it's not. Or I think it's going to be not great, and surprise, surprise, it's really wonderful.
So I think in there, and I think we discussed it during the podcast, that people have this perception that maybe you pair this kind of wine with this kind of fish. But that theory goes out the door when you just heap a ton of butter on it. So now you have to pair to the fish and the butter, and then maybe the mushrooms.
The mushrooms and the smokiness. Something usually is exacerbated you didn't expect.
Right.
And that's always a surprise. Or something you don't like initially ends up making the pairing work. Or something like that.
I would say so often we pair to the sauce and the style of cooking of the protein than we actually do the protein itself.
Yeah, because interestingly, the protein is somewhat more neutral than, this rich, buttery, mushroomy. Or
Sure. And the protein is very, it's open to how you're going to cook it, what sauce you're going to put with it. It's really a blank canvas.
Right.
You can do a fun tasting where you take the same protein and try it with 6 different sauces. 6 different wines. And
You've done that tasting.
Yeah, we've done that.
All right, so I think we got to move along on the wine, right?
So we got to try some food.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I didn't want to drink all the wine.
Also, I didn't tell you guys, there's pickles on this thing.
Pickles, great. For pairing pickles.
Pickles or something pickled?
Pickled things.
Pickled.
So we got 2 pickled things. We got pickled mushrooms and we got pickled green beans.
Okay.
Whenever we get a ton of green beans from our farmers, we just pickle them like a dilly bean. And it's delicious. And so what I love about this dish is that it tastes like a patty melt when you eat it all together, because you have your pickles, you have your grilled onions, you have your mushrooms, you have your Dijon. And I think it throws people off because they're expecting, one, not trout steeping in butter, but then also not the little bits of acidity and then the earthiness, and how fun and familiar the flavors are together.
Are the pickling parts your, not attempt, but desire to have some acidity in the dish, right?
Some acidity, and I also want to have something possibly from another season, something that's very much part of the farm. So having something like a pickle that could have been done in the summer, and then now it's,
right,
not quite spring, but spring. It's a different thing. So
yeah, one thing I love too about trying Cassidy's food and eating it is you eat this like beautiful composed dish with all these great elements to it, and then you taste it and you're like, wow, this is this kicks ass. And Cassidy's like, doesn't it taste like a patty melt? And you're like, oh yeah.
I love a patty melt.
So Cassidy, the way you're preparing it is the way you would do it, except you didn't grill the vegetables the mushrooms in front of us and onions.
I didn't grill them in front of you.
But would you cook the trout in a pan with the butter in an oven, or would you saute it?
We actually cook it in a pan in the hearth, the wood burning
The
hearth.
hearth. So it impairs that outside smokiness.
Yeah,
and all
but
that.
just a smidgen. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
too
I
much.
get it. I get it.
All right, so trout coming in. Are we all just sharing this bowl?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want another bowl to split up too?
Can. Or we can just share.
Whatever you want to do.
We're all friends, that's fine.
Are we all friends? Let's do this. All right. Oh, okay.
Oh
good.
wow.
And then you
Put all the butter on top of it. And here's where it comes into a kicker, because I want people to be like, oh, this isn't absolutely drowning in butter. So I add a little bit of Swiss chard to my mushrooms and my onions.
But that's like a shredded
Yeah.
People think Swiss chard, you're throwing leaves on it. It's shreds, right?
More like
Chiffonade.
Chiffonade.
More like a warm
See
little
Andy
salad.
reaching back to his old cooking
There it
days?
is. There it is. I remember that from the CIA. That's
Salt. Honestly, guys, I didn't eat the trout, so I think it's probably good on salt. We're friends here, if we're being honest. All right, so I'm barely wilting this with chard because I really kind of want that rawness and that texture.
Right. How do you describe chard? I mean, it's a green, leafy thing. What is it? Grassy? Is it mild?
I think it's mild. It's textural. It's going to add like a fresh greenness to it, and then
So texture and sort of a freshness.
and texture. All right, you guys ready?
We're ready.
And is this where we get to drink all the wine?
Yeah, I don't know why you're taking so long.
Again, if you wanted to talk about it first.
Oh, I'm pulling this all up. All right, guys. Where shall we do this? Here?
Put it right here. All right, so I want Andy to take the first bite.
okay. I'll take the first bite. So
And
I've got now 3 white wines in front of me.
Right.
And the 3 from earlier. So we had the Chendo Sauvignon Blanc. We have the Pierre Vincent Jardin Pouligny Montrachet.
Yes.
And then we have the Condrieu from Gigal, the Dordogne Condrieu.
So you're going to dive in with the fork. I'm not going to ask everyone this. But if you had a bet right now, and I had to send you home, which wine would go best with this? And then we'll drink it, and you may change your opinion. But what do you think?
My initial thought and reaction is that the white Burgundy, out of these three whites, will be the best paired.
Okay.
That's my initial thought.
So taste.
White Burgundy here in the middle.
It's in the middle.
Taste it here. But if you think about it, the butteriness and all those things. But I think pickles and mushrooms are strange.
Right, it may interact.
What a bunch of weirdos, right?
Here we go. I'm going in. Everyone else come by. Look at that taste.
Look at you.
Look at that.
Look at you. You're nailing this. I'm going to smash one up in a little bit of butter. Because why not?
We talked a lot about how much butter you put on this. It doesn't come across as like a heavy dish.
No.
It really...
Even if you dip the trout back in the butter. I'm not the hugest trout fan. No dislike. Just not the first thing I'd order. This is awesome.
Guys, I'm not gonna lie. I think it needs more salt. So here it is if you would like one on your bite.
The Viognier is quite good with this.
All right, I'm going to do one.
No, I think it needs salt.
It's okay.
I thought the white Burgundy really showed a lot of acidity, but the pickles came really out in the pairing with. That makes sense.
All right, so Andy, should we just do a quick 3 wine tasting just to do,
just
go
for
through
fun.
it once again?
You mean talk about the wines?
Yeah, and then let's maybe pick the best pairing.
Yeah.
Which one do you like?
So I'm in love with the fish. I mean, it's a great dish. So I just had a couple of tastes. I'm going to go back to the first wine, the Sauvignon Blanc.
So to me,
You guys didn't order it last night.
to me, what's interesting is that pairings.
I don't know. I don't think so.
It can kind of do whatever you want it to do. You mentioned you don't always order trout. It's not your favorite. I'm sort of in the same camp where I like trout, but I usually don't go out of my way to order it. I like it most when it's really mild. It's pretty mild.
Yeah.
When I try it with the Sauvignon Blanc, I feel like it brings the troutiness out in the dish. That's my own personal opinion.
So,
How much butter do we all have on us right now?
So you like the Sauv. It's a good match with the specifics.
Well, I think it accentuates the flavor of the trout.
Yeah.
I don't love trout flavors, so I think if you wanted the trout flavors to come forward, the Sauvignon Blanc's better.
Yeah, if you were a big trout person,
Exactly.
you love
Yeah.
ordering trout,
Yeah.
then you may find that to be the best pairing.
But for me, it's number 3 in this lineup. For me.
Okay.
And that's the thing about pairings.
Okay.
Right?
All right, so we're going to try the middle wine is the Girardin.
Yeah, the Pierre Vincent Girardin Pouligny Montrachet, the white Burgundy.
All right.
One of Cassidy's favorite
It's fancy wine.
wines.
As I said earlier, Cassidy's a very fancy person.
Fancy
Pouligny
wine.
Montrachet.
I'm a white burgundy girl. Yeah.
So
Bless my heart.
the ingredients are rich.
Yes.
Would you say this is a rich dish, or it kind of blends everything where it's not overly rich, or it is a rich dish?
I think you could, if you eat it wrong, it could be a rich dish. But if you get a bite of everything, it's definitely, I feel like it's balanced.
Yeah, I don't see it as. All right, so let's try that with the
White burgundy.
Burgundy.
I didn't know that we do that.
So I think, Andy, we all love Burgundy. I think it's a little flat against this dish.
Well,
Is
we were
that a
just
fair
talking.
perception?
I think the pickle quality in the dish comes out a little bit, and to me, it makes the wine. I don't know.
Flat
when
may
you say
not be
flat,
the right word, but
it seems to make the wine very acidic to me. Like that's what really lingers is this lean acidity.
Yeah.
And what made the wine so great before for me was that it was rich and round, but this has now taken that away from the wine. Like the butter canceled out the rich and roundness of the wine.
when you, Cassidy, when you made that butter, was that salted too, or not heavily?
Not heavily.
Right, which is
Not
why
heavily.
you're
Yeah.
pinching a little salt. All right, should we try
The viognier.
the viognier? This is
Ugh.
oh boy.
Cassidy doesn't love
I know
viognier.
from tasting earlier and drinking viognier, very aromatic nose, palate and all of that. Let's see how that works. You have a pickled element, you have a green element, you have foraged, earthy element, and you have the fish, right?
Yeah. So the dish is acidic and buttery.
Those little dilly bean bites.
I like the
sleep
dilly
on
bean.
those.
No, the dilly bean's a great
All right, here we
addition.
go.
Yeah, that acidity on that mushroom with this Condrieu, I think is really beautiful.
Okay.
You like that, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not a bad pairing.
It's a good
I
pairing.
will say that.
Viognier?
Yeah. I do not. I'm not going to drink this on a patio somewhere,
No.
but I will maybe smash it with that trout.
All right, so I'm going to chime in. I think the body is there. I think the aromatics are a little overpowering.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that would show up for every dish. And this dish has a lot of elements. Like I said, pickled, mushrooms, earthy that are strong. But this, it's a tough.
I personally like it, but I like.
I like it.
I think.
I just-
I think what this pairing does is it makes the viognier shine, and it kind of calms down the dish. So again, it's kind of what do you want to accentuate
Right.
to me,
So-
and that's
You just brought up a great point. When we talk about wine and food pairings, maybe I am focusing a little too much on the food and how does this wine pair? The food is, and I think you'll agree because you just said it, the food is there as much to accentuate the wine, which is part of the whole experience.
Yeah, I
it's
know.
not, does one complement the other, it's how they work.
Right.
What happens when you have them together, I think, is what a pairing is. And when people say this is a great pairing, I think they're looking at it through their own lens, right? Of what is it I liked that happened here? The same thing you like, and Cassie likes, and Trevor likes, and Kelly likes, I might not like. And so if it brings out the troutiness of the trout, and you like that, you like the flavor of trout, then you might like that pairing the most.
Right.
For me, I like the Viognier because, one, I love Viognier, and this pairing let it shine. It was sort of the star, and it kind of tamed a lot of the strong flavors, I think, in the dish. So that's for me. I will say I thought the white Burgundy was most surprising in that I thought it was going to be the best. And I thought it made the white Burgundy kind of thin.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is sad, You spend a lot of money on white Burgundy.
Right. But you know what? Next time you have a dish like this, you know that Burgundy may or may not show up. So if you don't order it, it's not the wrong move.
Yeah, it's good that we've done
are
this.
we
You want to do the reds?
Yes.
With it? Okay.
Yes. All right. So can I go around the horn and ask everyone to pick their favorite pairing? And that's in the context, and Andy just kind of taught me that it's not which is the best. It's what works for you
Correct.
or how, it accentuates the food or backwards. So in that context, Cassidy, am I expecting you to say the Burgundy? 'Cause
No, I agree that it did kind of make the Burgundy not as burgundy as I wanted
Right.
it. I'm gonna have to go with the first one,
Okay.
the Sauvignon Blanc.
Trevor?
Everyone else.
I really liked the Viognier with it. The
You did?
Gigal, the Condrieu.
Okay.
For me, as someone who's not, super, super well versed in pairing food with wine, I'm learning as I go along, and talking with Andy and Kelly, is a really great resource and tool for us. And one thing that I kind of look for is like you taste the dish, you taste the wine, and kind of go back and forth. And what is really exciting me? What do I want to keep going back and sipping? And the Condrieu was the first wine out of the glass for me.
It's an exciting wine.
Yeah.
I mean, there's maybe the most exciting of the three as far as how it presents itself.
And I thought, maybe sometimes the acidity can cancel out the acidity, but I thought it showed beautifully with that.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
which wine do you think was the best pairing?
So maybe I'm the oddball, but and this sort of speaks to everything we were just talking about, but I loved how with the white Burgundy, the acidity in the dish prolonged that mineral kind of zippy finish of the white Burgundy, sort of like enhanced the finish of it. And it made me enjoy the white Burgundy even more.
So,
This is fun about pairings.
Yeah.
well,
There's not an answer.
well, I love the fact that everyone has a different take and they're all convincing. I would say, in taking the easy way out, I would say that the Sauvignon Blanc is the best overall pairing. But that's kind of a lame move because everything everyone said really plays into it. And that was the whole point of doing this because we didn't all agree. It wasn't like, oh, that's it. It's like, this is it because of this reason. This is it for that reason. So that's, I think we had 4 or 5 different answers.
Yeah. Well,
Okay?
there could be, I mean, these are 3 wines.
Yeah.
We're going to have 3 more here. Like, there's we have 10,000 selections on the list.
All right. So now
we have reds.
Now we have the same dish, but we're going to try it with 3 reds. And before we make the evaluations, if anyone has an opinion on, oh, you never drink red wine with fish, speak now or forever hold your peace. Does anyone think that's a steadfast rule?
No.
Drink what you want with what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, Cassie, what'd you say this dish reminded you of? Patty melt?
A patty melt.
Might
Yeah,
be
that
interesting
ain't-
with red wine.
That
then,
can
right?
go red.
Yeah.
Also, this fish versus, white, flaky, delicate, probably holds up to reds, really well too. All right, so
Yeah.
let's taste the first red, which is the Hirsch Pinot.
Yeah, so I poured, hopefully for everyone left to right, the Hirsch Pinot from before, the Chateau de Tours in the middle, and then the Economy Mirabello third, the Greek wine that John brought to the table. I've tasted them all, so I just got to get a little chunk of it.
Whoa, that's a lot. That Greek number.
What do you mean a lot?
I think it might have moved towards my nostrils more than I needed it to.
Oh, wow. That's very lifted, yeah.
So we'll do it at the end, but the Hirsch seems to pair well nicely with it.
I liked it, yeah.
All right, the second wine is the
Sorry, Kelly.
Mirabello.
No, the second wine is the Chateau de Tours.
Okay. This is a all-time favorite of Andy's. So.
Oh, that Hirsch is lovely.
Yeah.
The Hirsch is lovely.
Out of 1 and 2, so far 1 is winning for me. And I like Grenache.
All right.
The Hirsch makes the Dijon pop.
Yeah, well, that's Pinot and mustard are
Pinot and mustard pop.
classic combo, right?
So the Tour, the Detour has that sort of funkiness and earthiness that goes well with the butter and mushrooms. It's a nice. This is a wine, Andy. It's not considered not high acid, but the acids are tame on.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a good food wine, but it's not that classic. It's got some acid food in it.
I think it's interesting. A lot of people look for acidity in food pairings. I think a lot of chefs put a lot of acid in their food to make the dish kind of well-rounded, and sometimes that can be dissonant with acid in wine. So, like, slightly lower acid wines sometimes work well because there's space for them in the dish.
All right, let's try the last one.
Then
This is a Greek red. The great Kelly. Do you remember
Liatico was one of them. And
couldn't tell you.
Mavrodaphne was.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't as common as that one. It was something else.
So a couple of minutes
That's
ago,
common.
Cassidy jumped out about this wine. What'd you say about it when you tasted it?
Lovely.
The Greek one?
you
Oh,
said-
no,
you
it's a
said
lot. It's a bit much.
It jumped out of.
That's what
Yeah.
you said, but what does that mean?
One, I probably drank it funny because it really did go out my nostrils, but it's bringing like a whole bunch more funk than I want.
Yeah. What kind of funk? It's a little, in a good way. A lot of wines do this, like Barolo sometimes. It's a little volatile, which means there's acid that volatilizes, and you can smell like vinegar.
Yeah,
does, but
it's
not to
almost
that
like
extent.
this like mushroom vinegar that I've had in the past. Yeah, you're coughing.
It's real smooth.
It's really getting down there. It's just bringing kind of like an earthy funk.
Yeah.
Something I might like power wash off.
It's
you know.
not- I wouldn't pick it first, but I think it works. But it's interesting, how much Greek wine are you tasting, with dishes like this. All right, so let's same drill over again. Individual calls. If you had to pick one wine that you think pairs the best with this, which one and why? Cassidy?
I'm gonna go with the Hirsch. It brought the Dijon forward, and I really wanted it to be more of a forward element in this dish because we didn't talk about the Dijon at all with the white
and
wines.
it's prominent in the right way.
Yeah.
And then it brings it and it balances out all of the flavors in the dish in the way that I wanted it to be balanced.
Was the Dijon mixed into the butter?
Yeah.
So in that glob or 2 globs of butter, how much Dijon was that? Less than a tablespoon?
No, there's
If
quite
there was
a bit.
a decent amount?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's not overpowering, but it's there.
And it's also caramelized when the butter is hot, so it lowers kind of the Dijoniness of it all. But I would say it's 2 parts butter to 1 part Dijon.
All right, Trevor, your wine with this dish and why?
I'm going to go with the Hirsch as well.
Okay.
I just thought it really made the wine sing, and something about the Greek one, kind of the last one. While I enjoyed it on its own, I thought it brought out, like, when I tasted it, some of the funkier notes in it that I didn't really enjoy with the trout.
Yep. Kelly?
So I'm a little bit torn because I like both the Hirsch and the Detour with it. I think if I was just eating the trout sort of by itself with the Detour, that would be like a dreamy pairing for me. With all the other components in the dish, I think the Hirsch plays the best.
Right. So that's the real answer because you're
Right.
eating the dish with all the other components.
True. I think that that's what makes this kind of pairing so everyone's opinions are so different and it's so fractured. It's like there's so many different elements versus like the classic pairings of like this cheese with this wine. Like that's why those pairings can kind
single
of
cheese, yeah.
right hold true universally. And then when you throw all these other things in, I think preferences come into play so much more.
Yeah.
All right, Andy?
I thought the Hirsch won, personally. Yeah. I not just because of what it did for the dish. I love the way the Hirsch tasted with it. I mean, it was a great fruit. I liked the Hirsch earlier when it was on its own. I thought I could sit around and drink this. And a lot of times when wines are like that, I find I don't love them with pairings because they get pushed out of some balance that made them enjoyable on their own. But I thought with this dish, I really liked both.
I'm going to have to agree. As much as, the Detour is, a special wine and, it's good with food. I think all elements of the dish, like you said, the Dijon, which is there, it brings it out. I think it holds up to the fish, the butter. I think there's an earthiness in the wine and in the mushrooms that, match. I think it's really beautiful in that sense.
Yeah.
All right, so that was Cassidy's trout with pickled vegetables and mushrooms with a butter.
Dijon brown butter.
Dijon brown butter. All right, so we're going to move along now, and Trevor is going to step up to the plate. And Trevor, talk about what you're preparing. I see like all these dishes of ingredients too.
Yes, so what I'm going to prepare for the tasting is a honey and rosemary roasted chicken.
Okay.
With potato pave, a fennel and radish salad with the mustard vinaigrette, and a little bit of fresh herbs. So we're same on the mustard train. This is a very kind of mustard forward dish. It also has a chicken jus that's cooked down really low and slow that has a lot of whole grain and Dijon added to it for a little bit of that spice and the roundness.
The jus comes from when you're cooking the chickens, the juice and reduction from.
Well, actually, we make a stock. So our restaurants make stock in a similar way. So we start with a bunch of roasted chicken backs and chicken legs, chicken feet, everything. Cook it down with some water, take the bones out. And then the next day we'll fortify it with some wine and then some more roasted chicken wings. When it's cold, you can cut it with a knife. So it's super delicious and gelatinous. And for this dish too, we also just serve the breast on the cage. So we'll cut the legs and the thighs off. And then we can reserve those for stock or other dishes. We've got a new pasta dish on that has some smoked dark meat chicken on there. So that's what we're utilizing those for right now. And then overnight, we brine the chicken in honey and salt. So it's a pretty stout brine. It's 1.5 cups and 1 cup of honey per gallon of water. So they stay in overnight. And then we'll par cook them off a little bit. And then brush them with a little bit of our marinade.
Which is?
So this is...
That's not the honey stuff.
No, this is not.
That's herbs and oil?
Yeah, so right now these chickens have been brined overnight and then par cooked. So we use a CVAT machine. It's kind of like a sous vide without the bags, and we cook them to 135 so that we can roast them.
How long? Until you reach 135 or at 135 for how long?
It's about 2 hours.
Okay.
Just so that we can roast them in a really, really hot oven to get the some really great color on the skin and a little bit of that crispiness.
That's not cooked to eat if you just did that? It's not.
This is not ready.
You need to bring it up more.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you'd be rolling the dice if you ate a bite of this chicken.
I wish.
No one is.
It's not that good yet. I wouldn't roll the dice just yet.
Okay.
We're also going to do a little bit of TV magic. So this will go in at 425 for about 12 to 15 minutes to get that really good color and a little bit of crisp on the skin. Yeah, and
bring the inside by the bones to the temperature?
Yes.
So what's TV cooking? That one goes in and the real one comes out?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Okay. As soon as the pave's ready, this one's going to get warmed up and be ready to go. So the next component of this dish is the potato pave. So a pave is something sliced thin, most often potatoes, and then layered with a little bit of fat and seasoning in between every layer.
Each layer. Is like duck fat the preference, or it doesn't matter? So
for us, since this is a chicken dish,
fat?
We're using like the chicken fat and the duck fat with a little bit of garlic and thyme. So if you want to take a look on there, you can see just how many layers are in there.
What is there, like 30 or 40 or more?
Like 6 million.
Yeah. When you put them together,
6 million layers.
How do you get those layers? Mandolin or slicing machine?
We've done both, the mandolin and the slicing machine, and we also want to buy a sheeter, so it's a little bit faster.
Okay.
Trevor looked at me when he said that. I don't know why.
Trevor, can you make that like in a loaf and cut it, or how do you do?
Yeah, so we make it in like a half hotel pan, so you could make it if you were making it at home in like a Pyrex dish or a deep kind of pan you have. So this one probably starts out as like, 3.5 inches tall, and then as it cooks a little bit, so you cook it for about an hour in the oven, and then we'll press it overnight.
What temperature did you say?
325.
Jesus. What are the potatoes pre or par cooked at all before you go in? They're raw potato slices, fat in between, built up.
Yeah, so it's the raw potato slices, and we try not to hold them in water either, because we want that great starch from the potatoes to kind of bind with that fat to help it be really sturdy when you're cooking it. So these you can, dice up. Really anything with them, they hold really well. So right now we're just going to get a nice sear on there to get it really golden brown and delicious.
Do you sear then oven, or is it a pan dish or pan into the oven?
It'll go into the oven if it needs to get hotter in the middle. So it just kind of depends on how thick they are. This one's about an inch thick and then 2 by 3 wide. So this one may get all the way there in the pan.
Okay. All right, so we have the 3 reds, we have the 3 whites. Andy, let's talk about this for a second. Cassidy made a dish with multiple ingredients, but I guess we can call it like a one-pan dish, because you had cooked the trout in the oven to, melt the butter and cook the fish. Then you added the pickled elements and you had sauteed the mushrooms, but you threw them in there. Here we have how many different elements? The chicken, the pave. What are all these vegetables in front of them?
So over here we have something for a nice light fennel salad.
Cold?
It's going to be room temperature.
Okay.
I'd say this is perfectly room temperature. For quite some time.
Sitting out in the room for a bit. So.
The perfect room. And this is going to add a little bit of crunch to the dish and then some freshness from the vegetables. There also is mustard in 2 places in this dish. So in the jus, that's cooked down with the chicken. And as it cooks down, kind of low and slow, it gets a little bit caramelized. So it gets, the richness and the sweetness really comes out. And this is a vinaigrette that also has Dijon and whole grain in it.
Give me the ingredients and the proportions on the vinaigrette. Everybody likes to know how to make a good vinaigrette.
So for this vinaigrette, we do about a teaspoon of shallot.
Chopped shallot.
Chopped shallots, yes. About 3 ounces of whole grain mustard, 3 ounces of Dijon mustard, 4 ounces of champagne vinegar, and about a pint of olive oil.
Okay.
So we use.
What's the whole grain mustard for texture or a different flavor or both?
I think it gives a great look to it with kind of the mustard seeds, but also the variation of flavors. The Dijon and the whole grain both have a nice spice to them. But I feel like in combination together, they really help each other sing. The Dijon is what I use mostly for vinaigrettes, right. But since this is so mustard forward, I feel like the whole grain has a little bit more spice to it. That's going to help bring a lot of balance to this dish. And we've tried this dish a few different ways. So when I plate it, I'm going to plate one with some dill on the top and one without some.
Why is that an issue?
Well, I think you heard Cassidy giggling from the back. But I guess, I don't know. I'd say dill's not Andy's favorite herb.
And it's my favorite herb.
And it's Cassidy's favorite.
So, Andy, I
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Herb, I guess.
Yeah, I also, we've tried this dish for a few wine dinners. I feel that the dill hard to pair. The dill changes the pairing. So a dish that on the surface might look like a really great burgundy type of dish then isn't because of this one component that's almost a garnish. But I think, when you're thinking of those things, you sort of top it with, well, people eat that, and it does change the pairing considerably, I think. And I think dill is probably as divisive as viognier.
Or cilantro.
Well, I was just going to say,
yeah.
Cilantro is, I feel the same way about cilantro as he does dill.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. I don't think it goes with anything.
Are you eating here tonight?
Yeah. Dogwood. We'll be here tomorrow.
Because there's a dill dish on tonight.
I love dill.
It's really good.
Just so you know. All right. Trevor, you put in shaved. Is that the right description? Shaved fennel?
Yep, shaved fennel, shaved radishes.
Sliced red radishes. What were, not the dill yet, but
not the dill.
Put 2 other
Parsley.
greens. What's the first? That's parsley?
Parsley.
Like big broadleaf parsley?
And then this is a purple Mizuna. So it's like an heirloom type of mustard green.
Yeah.
And
just have it in a mixing bowl.
In some bowl. And so right now I'm going to lightly salt it to help it kind of break down. Right. So the thickness of the fennel is an important component to this dish. So if you look at the fennel and the radish, you can see they're all maybe a little bit more of an
there's
eighth of an inch
some
thick.
crunch.
So there's still some substance to it. And as it's a dish that has hot components of the sauce, the pave, and the chicken, and more of a room temperature with the salad, as it kind of blends with everything else, if it was shaved really thin, it would kind of lose its substance and its crunch.
Right.
So to shave it a little thicker, I think leaves it really nice. And as it, we plate it up under the heat lamps, the salad does, sometimes become kind of warm, especially when you mix it with the jus and the chicken and the pave and all that. So the thickness is very important. Also, the salt helps draw out a little bit of moisture out of there. So as we mix this vinaigrette in here in just a moment, it'll make a nice fresh salad for this.
All right, so it's plated with the chicken, the potato pave, and the salad. So you have three.
And the
sauce.
mustard jus.
The mustard juice, you're right.
So a little more traditional kind of plating.
Yeah.
That you might expect, sort of thing.
Yeah. Chicken, Andy. A lot, you did my wine list today, and I asked for people's favorite wine and food pairing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people through the years say Burgundy and roast chicken. The classic.
It's a classic.
Like champagne and oysters and all of that. Do you think that the reds will wind up pairing better than the whites, or not necessarily?
I'm not sure, and I think it will depend which version you try with the dill or not the dill. Honestly, or which bite you take. The salad is interesting. If you took off this herb salad, you just had the pave, the mustard jus, and the chicken, I think that would go with just about every single wine on earth. I think it's a really good pairing. It's not a lot of conflicting flavors. A lot of kind of base notes, really good with most wines. When you add this other element that kind of makes the dish more complex, it has more flavors, I think, I think you end up with more things that people may love or may not love, that get accentuated through the pairing. Generally speaking, though, I think we all tend to think reds with this dish. I think that's kind of where our first, idea goes. But I'm sitting here looking like that fennel's probably going to be really good with Viognier.
I was going to say, we have some interesting white, and there's some interesting elements like the fennel.
And I often think things that go with red Burgundy or Pinot go really great with white Burgundy, Chardonnay. So this could also be a great white Burgundy dish. It's going to be interesting, I think. Looks good.
Looks
that,
good.
Yeah, chicken's coming out of the oven.
Wait, was that the one that was parred, whatever, cooked?
That's TV magic.
Oh, that's the TV magic.
TV magic.
All right.
It looks
Remember, I said this is audio. I have to guess. Can I ask you guys something?
Yeah.
I've looked at the menus for the last few days, and there's so many changes and everything. It's obvious to me that you're cooking based on the ingredients available, right? Mm-hmm. Seasonal, what you like, what your specialty is. When you look forward to the wine thing, how much thought is put towards, the wine and the list that exists here, and how much collaboration is there? Do you share the menu with the wine staff, or do they tell you? How does that work?
Well, we have really great resource with such a robust and experienced wine team. So as we do dinners where we pair a lot with guest vintners. We just had a great event where we got to try a ton of Gigal wines.
Right.
So having a resource like Andy and Kelly is really great for us to kind of talk through, what about, this dish with this pairing, or, can you give me some recommendations for this? Because as chefs, we like to write a menu that has, a great progression in it, right. So you kind of want to, traditionally it's like you start with the salad, then you go into the fish, and then, something finish with a larger meat. But, sometimes we'll do, a wine dinner with a Burgundy producer where it's, one Chardonnay and then, 3 or 4 Pinot Noirs coming up, some from the same, the same vineyard, but different years. So talking with them about the different subtleties of, what wine would be great with this dish is it's just outstanding for us. I mean, it'd be tough without them to kind of, give us some guidance on some things. And then you find pairings that you really love. We had an event recently where Gone Medville was one of the guest winemakers. And I have a tuna crudo dish I really like, and it's really big dish. Like, it's very acidic. It's a little bit spicy. It's got a little bit of onion and arugula oil to it. And we've tried it with a few different wines, and we had it with Grand Cru Champagne, and it was out of this world. Yeah. So some of the pairings we get to try here, it just kind of blows your mind. How good it is, and what people would say is like, I didn't expect this to be, as great with this or something like that. So it's really cool.
Cassidy, I know, every night you're not drinking wine, all night or whatever, but during the course of a week or certain things, I mean, are you trying wines that the Psalms bring back, or maybe you do want a glass of wine? I mean, do you imbibe when you can?
Actually,
Am I
no.
going to get you fired?
I don't.
I try to feed Cassidy wine regularly.
You do? Does that sort of impair or distract you from what you're doing? Or?
I am just so focused on getting my job done and correctly and making sure that all of my boxes are checked that most of the time I really only drink 1 day a week. And normally I'm not here. Actually, typically I'm not here for that. If there is a great pairing and everyone's like super pumped about it, yes, I will try it.
Right.
But for the most part, I stay pretty focused on.
Trevor, a little more, same, less?
I'd say more than one night per week, but yeah, we like to try different wines with different
inquisitive. Food. You want to try stuff, right?
Yeah, in preparation for this podcast, Andy and I have been talking a lot about pairings recently. He said, what's one thing that's great with everything? It's pizza. So we got our downtown wine and spirits order yesterday, and a couple of pizzas, and tasted through a couple wines.
All right, are we ready to cut into that chicken? Does it have to rest anymore? The pave will be ready?
The pave is ready.
All right.
So I don't know if you could hear when Cassidy was talking about hers, but I tried to put a little sizzle to the microphone and shake the paves around so you can hear how nice and crispy they are.
How do you, so we have these whole chickens, like you said, with the wings and legs removed. How big is that chicken? Is that a 2-3 pound chicken originally? Before?
Yeah, they're about 3.5 pound chickens.
And when you finish cooking a chicken, you definitely should let it rest?
Yes, you should.
And
since this one was a little TV magic and par cooked, it came out of the oven, so this should be rested beautifully for us. So what I've done right now is the paves are nice and crisp, and they're hot in the middle, so I've placed those in the plate and tossed a little bit of the vinaigrette on this fennel and radish salad with a little bit of the parsley and the mustard greens. And I've got the mustard jus hot on the stove. So we'll go ahead and start plating this up. So the pave's down, then we'll put a little bit of this salad kind of right off the side of the pave.
Can I ask you a dumb question? When you eat pave, do you eat against the grain or with the grain? Because if you eat with the grain, it kind of comes off. If you go against the grain, you got to cut. What do you do? Because I think you can get in trouble against the grain, but in your opinion, it may be the right way to do it.
I think however you can get it there is really good. So
I am fully against the grain. Yeah. If it's cooked correctly, you won't get into any trouble.
Okay, because it'll kind of come to you.
We'll know
the way
soon if I'm in trouble or not.
And then the chicken, do you cut out the breast and then slice the breast? How do you do that?
Yes, so we'll carve the chicken off. We leave the wing attached while it's cooking to just help it stay really, really nice and juicy. So we'll carve in here just right along the backbone.
I'm being quiet because I'm trying to figure out how to do this, because in my neighborhood, when it comes to chicken, I'm called the butcher. Look at that. All right. So you're cutting it off the bone, skin on really in place, right?
Oh, yeah.
and then you'll take each breast and cut it horizontally, right?
Yes, yeah. So we'll cut it in half, and then depending on what type of dinner it is, we've done some smaller dinners where this is one of like 5 courses, and so we'll do a really small slice of it. As we serve it as an entree at the Dogwood, we'll serve it as a whole breast, but I think it just kind of depends on the size of the dinner. I'm going to get it just a little bit warmer.
Okay.
Movie magic.
Movie magic is right. I don't know why I keep saying So
It's the 6 glasses of wine.
maybe. Well, we did 6 and we're doing another
Yeah.
6. I
Round 2
want to
of
remind
6.
everyone that we will have a completely plated dish, the pave, the salad, and the chicken breast, and we are going to consume that with the same 6 glasses of wine and see what works best. Now, Trevor, that's a darker sauce because it's a chicken jus, the mustard. It's
Cook it way down.
Yeah. So we
there's
like
a
to get
reduction to it.
a really great roast on the chicken, so it has that really nice golden color, and then we cook it way down. So,
Like how far? Like how many gallons do you start with and how much do you end with?
this is about
Or
a
what's
cup
the
of
proportion?
sauce in this pot right here, and I'd say this cup of sauce started as 3 quarts of chicken stock.
Wow.
Maybe more.
That little pot was 3 quarts.
Yes. Of your kind of like basic chicken stock
Yeah.
of what you think of
Nothing like
coming off. But yeah, so when it's cold in the refrigerator, like I said, you can take it out and slice it with a
You
knife.
never put a little wine or anything into it, right?
It is fortified with some red wine.
It is? Okay. All right, so Trevor's going to plate everything.
Smells
and
good.
It smells good.
Andy, what should we drink through first, the whites or the reds? I'm going to defer to you on this.
Yeah, it's I think we should go the same order. We should go whites and then
We
reds.
should do what we did
Yeah.
before.
Just for,
Okay.
for, as I like to say, in the name of science. We should just,
Science.
In science. This is scientific. And to see sort of what, yeah. There you go.
We're having a little whisper aside over here.
All right, so
Trevor's
I have
giving
a
us plating
question.
portions,
We
tasting portions.
did fish with sauce. If you had chicken and you just ate the chicken without the skin, and then you ate just the skin or the skin with the chicken, do you think that would impact a pairing thing, or that's the package?
No, I think it does
may-
impact. I think
yeah.
it does impact in that, the skin is, especially when it's done like this, it's crispy and brown and roasted. It's a totally different flavor. It's sort of like sauce is very important in a pairing. I think cooking technique is also very important. If you were talking about flaky whitefish earlier. If you have flaky whitefish, well, you could poach it or, shallow poach it. You could cook it on the wood grill. That'd be totally different, right? So it's sort of cooking technique, I think, matters quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about, in this case.
So my friend Sarah Chabot is here, and she's taking pictures, and she just whispered in my ear. She said, "Pave again?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I make this every night."
She does.
I'm like, "Wow."
Makes a mean
I didn't know
pave.
that about you.
Yeah. We call her the pave chef here at the farm.
Yeah, the pave queen. All right,
So we got two, so we can.
are we ready to dig in?
Yeah.
All right, so
Sounds good.
These are the same, right, Trevor?
Yes.
Okay. You want to leave one over there? Or you guys? Yeah.
So I think what I want to do
Yeah,
is
a little-
the first wine is the Ascendo. I'm going to coat
Yeah.
my mouth with it first.
Yeah, I think reset your palate a little
And I
bit.
think what I want to do is take a piece of chicken and dip it in the sauce.
Yeah, get the whole thing.
And then I'm going to throw.
Just break apart a little bit.
That's how you make chicken, Katie. All right.
Chicken's good, huh?
Wow. All right.
some
Super
good
tender, super flavorful. Skin is unbelievable. Okay.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right. I'm going to be the first to throw the Sauvignon Blanc over.
You're doing it.
I don't love it on the outside.
Okay. First initial impression.
We're
You don't love the pairing, not the
We're going to
wine.
go through everything, and that could change because wine changes in the glass or whatever. Katie, you want to come by?
You want to switch here?
All right, now I'm
Yeah,
going
sure.
to take another
far
piece
as
of chicken.
you get a-
some fat. Not found. That's how you make a found. All right, second one.
Thank you.
So the nose on the...
That sauce is incredible, Trev. Well, I thank you.
All right, I'm not going to lie to anyone. That white burgundy goes pretty well with this food. Okay?
We don't want you to lie.
You know, I'm not going to yank anyone.
I'm going to agree with you on that one.
Right? There's something I don't think I don't know if it's this Sauvignon Blanc or a Sauvignon Blanc, but it's better.
It's fun.
And then, come on. And then I'm taking another little piece of chicken. And
you
let's
gone-
see how
you
I
gone
think the
potato
B&A
yet?
maybe. So Andy, the Viognier in the glass, the nose has sort of changed or evolved a little. Some of the aromatics are there, but they don't blow out of the glass the way they.
Not quite as strong. And it might be that you've normalized to the wine a little bit too. You used to it.
I think the Viognier goes pretty well with this.
I've actually been surprised how well the Viognier is going with things because it is has such a strong personality on its own.
All right, has everyone tasted the food and all three wines?
All three whites, yeah.
Yeah.
3 whites, I meant. All right, so can we go around the horn?
Let's do it.
And Cassidy, what white wine of the 3 with Trevor's dish of chicken, potato pave, and a leek salad with a Dijon? What wine do you think?
Hands down the white burgundy.
Okay.
White burgundy.
Trevor?
I'm jumping back and forth a little bit.
From what to what?
I really like the white burgundy with it. I think that, you kind of look at how kind of brown that sauce is, but it does have that like richness and acidity, and I think that acidity is kind of like, kind of plays together. Like, I want the mustard, I want the wine, I want the mustard again.
Right.
But yeah, I'm gonna do it. But yeah, there's something about like the minerality in this Viognier that just, I don't know. I feel like this and the trout is like really, really coming out.
I put the Viognier first or second. I mean, it's definitely, a consideration. Kelly?
I think I'm also going to be team white burgundy, not
Okay.
because it was my wine, but
I think this is a pretty sure, match. Andy?
Sorry, I was just trying it again with the Sauv Blanc. Honestly, I could appreciate any one of these.
Yeah.
I thought with the Sauvignon Blanc, a kind of strong pineapple-y character in the wine came out. If you like pineapple, I think that might be great.
It has evolved.
Yeah.
It knows even has
It has,
pineapple.
yeah.
It
It's
wasn't
very,
that
it's more tropical
before
now.
and at the beginning of this
And maybe it's
tasting.
warmed up because we chilled it a bit. If you look at my 3 glasses, I think you'll see the white burgundy is either the one I was thinking about the most or I liked the most because it's gone. And so I really liked that pairing. Again, it tasted pretty acidic to me on the pairing. And the Viognier, I really enjoyed that pairing. I don't think the Viognier or the dish changed with the Viognier. I like both, and so I like the pairing. I think as a pairing that does something, I think the Chardonnay, the white burgundy, was the one I liked on the whites.
I'll probably agree, and for all the right reasons, I would say the burgundy. You can't go wrong with that. And I think this is one of those things that if you serve any of these wines with any of these dishes, it would work. If you had Cassidy's trout, if you pulled any one of these 6 wines, it would work.
Yeah,
we're a bunch of nerds, and we're trying to figure out,
Well, and it
what's
works,
best.
especially if you say why it's working. I think that's kind of like if you say, I love it with the Sauvignon Blanc because it brings out this pineapple quality. Okay.
Right.
That's a good reason, and that's
the complementing of each thing. There should be an explanation.
Yeah.
All right, let's taste through the reds. So
I gotta
we're going to And then I'm going to ask which
chef's
red
table.
and why, but I want to know ultimately what's better, the best
Red
red
or
or the
white?
best white.
All right,
best white,
all right.
Okay. And for you keep reminding me. You got to give me the reason why,
Yeah.
not just which is the best.
No.
All right, so we
Best
got
is such
the Hirsch. Still. Sarah, you're not eating.
Where the
any
hard
chicken?
part is
You made
getting
me-
a flavor.
Made me eat lunch twice today. All right, so chicken. That sauce is unbelievable.
sauce is good. I could eat the sauce in that pave all day long.
I could take a bath in that sauce.
That'd be cool.
But then we'd have to reduce like 3 tons of chicken. Right? All right, so the Hirsch. Andy, do you think the Hirsch
Initially,
is
I like
a
it.
compatible wine to this?
I think
I
it
mean,
is.
a compatible wine for this.
I think it's compatible. To me, this was the first time I've had the Hirsch today with something that I thought made the Hirsch a little thin.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big, not big, but a lot of nice big flavor.
Yeah.
The sauce, the leeks are always,
The sauce is very because it's so reduced, it's tacky on the palate. And
Right,
I
so now
like it with the Pinot. I
let's-
thought.
Let's see what happens with Burgundy, right?
Oh, with no, Chateau de Tour.
I mean the Detour. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. The Detour. Because you know what Kelly did? She stuck the Burgundy in the middle of the red.
Oh,
I'll never forget
of
what
the
Detour
whites?
did. All right, so
Oh,
the
the whites,
Detour,
yeah.
I have a feeling this may work well.
I don't know if it's just me, but the Detour is like exceptionally singing right now.
If it got
Also with
better,
the dish,
yeah.
but just on its own, it's
The wine
So
itself,
delicious.
not closed, or
Yeah.
it is.
I'm saying it's singing right now.
It's in a good spot now.
Yeah, it's reached a really
I
beautiful
think
like
the
that.
peak.
Detour is a totally different wine with this dish than Cassidy's.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And to that, I think it's a better.
I'm
pairing.
not sure if it's because the wine sat in the glass longer or just the compatibility factor. It's definitely changed in the glass. I mean, it's nicer.
It has changed in the glass, and I think Grenache, especially their style, I think really needs a lot of air. I always think of it as a bit of an anemic grape. that
So
requires
the
oxygen.
air, I mean, we've been here pushing an hour.
Yeah.
The air has only helped this one.
I think so.
And typically it does.
Typically,
Even in the glass, it'll get better before it deteriorates. And we're at that get better point.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and I think Grenache needs it, especially Grenache that has a little age like this one, needs it more than you might think.
Yeah.
Because it's older. A
I
lot of
think
people
that-
are very.
I think it's a really good tip because I think sometimes you'll open an older Grenache and you'll think like, oh, this wine's tasting a little tired. Maybe it's not going to be that great. Then you come back to it like 30 or 40 minutes later and you're like, man, this is delicious.
Right.
All right, now we're going to try the third and final,
The
and the
Attica.
third and final red, the sixth and final wine, the second time around for Trevor's dish. And may I note Cassidy's favorite wine of the six.
You could tell by her reaction earlier.
Yeah.
She said it's a really, what'd you say?
I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
It's a lie.
All right, so here we go.
Nope.
So, by the way, Cassidy, this wine has calmed down a little. Andy, would you agree with me?
Not enough.
I think, I never use this
evolved
word with wine, but there's sort of a bitter after palate. There's a, not necessarily off-putting, but it's definitely a characteristic. And it may work with this dish. So, my final taste is going to be the chicken first. And I'll throw in the Greek wine over it. See what happens. So, two things. One, I am so appreciative of the fact that we got to taste kind of a high-end, interesting, not known to a lot of people, Greek red wine. Because I don't know where else I would taste this. That's the first thing. So that's, a big thing to me. The second thing is I don't think it's the wine for this pairing. So I'm ruling it out on the reds in that sense.
What food would you pair with that?
I would pair. My aunt used to cook like a 30-pound turkey for 40 minutes, and then she would make a gravy and wouldn't separate the grease from the stuff. So I would pair it with that.
The stuff with the grease and the turkey.
Well, there was like 2 layers. There was the sauce and then the grease, and you'd pour it, and eventually they'd not. I think this would go well with that.
Got it.
Okay.
It's a good turkey grease pairing.
I almost think this
And undercooked turkey.
Yeah. Raw turkey grease.
I think this needs a stronger flavor, like spices that we haven't had, like
Right.
like, like cumin or like
Yeah.
something along those.
Or like, like a gyro where the outside is grilled, which has its own aspect of.
I think lamb too.
Lamb
would be very nice with this.
Lamb.
I think something like almost even with raisins, like
Yeah.
Like the lamb dish that's on right now, it's got raisins in it and spices.
Yes,
All right, so
That dish would be
Cassidy,
great. Not this dish.
pick a red that you think pairs well with Trevor's
Toasted that
dish.
one.
I'm gonna have to just go with the tour. Is that
Yeah.
You do.
I do. I actually, everyone's right. It has opened up. It's become something amazing. The balance that it's bringing to the chicken and to the sauce, which is just like this like hyper chicken flavor with Dijon, fantastic. The fennel working really well with it. Everything on that plate.
So
I
even
think-
the fennel works well.
Even the fennel.
is actually very good with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Trevor?
He is reassessing.
One last,
still assessing.
one last test
Slurping.
series. What do you think of the 3 reds?
If you pick this Greek wine, I'm walking out.
Trevor?
I'm not going to
Don't
pick
say that.
I did think that there was something interesting about like, I don't know, kind of when I smelled that, I felt like there was like a little like over caramelized note. I guess like when
raisin? Or
In what, the Greek wine? Or
in the Greek wine. Yeah,
so
like,
you're leaning towards that?
No. But I thought that with the chicken Jew was
listen,
interesting.
No.
I may sound silly, but I'm not crazy is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so which one?
I hate to hop on the bandwagon, but I think the Dator is also
No
just really
bandwagon, it's the
fantastic
best
with
wine.
it.
Yeah.
Consensus.
Sometimes it's just true.
Kelly,
Yes. The Dator.
the Dator?
For certain. And I think even on its own right now, it's just really an amazing wine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Andy, but here's the question. You can say the Dator, but you have to go to 5 years of prison, or you could pick something else. What would it be?
Ooh.
I would pick the Hirsch at that point.
You would? Okay.
I honestly, I thought the Hirsch.
Even as it changed, and all that still?
I
But
think-
is Dator your first choice?
Yes, in the pairing today is my first choice for this dish. The Hirsch with it is very refreshing. I like that. I could drink that Hirsch, like drink it with this dish. The Dator, to me, is a better pairing with this dish. It just depends what I'm looking for again. Like right now, I would drink the Hirsch instead of the Dator on its own. I like it more, kind of just as is. The Dator with the pairing, I think it tones down some of that Garrigue, Southern French stuff. It lets the wine really show. I think the sauce works perfectly with it. And the fennel in the dish, I really like the fennel with the Dator. Just that one bite, I thought was great.
Yeah. And you'd know better than me. Fennel's not the easiest thing to pair. It's like up there with asparagus. And
Yeah, it's one of those, it's one of
salami,
And dill.
those crazy.
flavors, and a lot
Yeah.
of times what you think is going to be great with it isn't great with it. Like you have this idea, like, oh, this is going to be perfect, and then it's not. And I think a lot of times when I think that way, Grenache steps in and catches it.
And,
I can do this.
I wouldn't say versatility, but it kind of works with
It's
a lot
pretty
of
versatile.
stuff. It is versatile.
You know.
All right, so let's wrap this up.
Yeah, this is fun.
So I want to thank Cassidy Dabney. Cassidy is the executive chef at the barn at Blackberry Farm. Cassidy prepared a trout with a special butter. I still can't figure out how to describe it. Pickled vegetables and the mushrooms. Fabulous dish. And I think the consensus on that dish was the Hirsch, and on the white it was we remember?
Viognier, I thought.
It was maybe the
day.
Viognier.
Cassidy
But
said
of
it was
the
okay.
white and the red, like if there was just like going across the board, what did everybody like the most?
Generally?
Yeah,
Of the 6 wines?
of the 6 wines.
So if you had to pick one of the 6 with the trout, I would go with,
Hirsch.
I think I'd go with the Hirsch.
I go Hirsch.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
Okay.
really surprises me, actually,
Yeah.
because Pinot Noir is a very quirky
Yeah,
pairing.
we talked about that.
I'm very
lot.
quirky.
Yeah, but this is a
I was
very...
surprised
this is
how well the pickled mushroom went with that. Hirsch.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then Trevor Iaconis, who is the executive chef at Dogwood. So when you come to Blackberry Farm, there's a separate building, the barn, which Cassidy oversees. And I forgot how Sam described it. The type of cuisine is called
Foothills?
foothills, which is we're in the foothills of the Smokies, and it's all the ingredients and foraging from around here. Trevor, your cooking is a little more, a little departure from that, a little more contemporary, or how would you describe?
I'd say we both kind of fall into that foothills cuisine category. I think one of the great things about, Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain is there's, 4 different executive chefs on this property and 3 different executive chefs up there. So with access to the same purveyors and kind of the same terroir of the area, we all have our own kind of like different spin,
Right.
Kind of
You
flavor
don't necessarily
profile.
have to label it.
Yeah.
It's here's what we do with what we have. So I'm finishing up. Trevor's dish was it was a roasted chicken that was par cooked initially, right?
Yeah, honey rosemary roasted chicken.
Right. You said it was sort of like a sous vide style. Does that keep it juicy and moist and everything?
It does, and it's something that you can recreate at home in your oven. So if I was going to cook this at my house where I don't have a sous vide or the CVAT machine, start it really low and slow at about 200, 250 degrees in the oven. And that way, since there's so much honey in the brine, if you cook it really hot, when you roast a turkey or a chicken and you get that really golden brown, nice skin, with the honey in the brine, it can get burnt pretty quickly if you cook it at that high heat, which helps kind of lock in the juices.
Right.
So you could start it at about 200, 250 degrees for maybe an hour.
And what's the final temperature?
400 with the fan on if you have it.
What's the total cooking time?
I'd say probably an hour and a half.
And that's what, a 3-pound bird?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, so Trevor's dish was the chicken we just described with a potato pave, which is thinly sliced, layered slices of potato with fat in between, cooked in a saute pan, and then maybe finished in the oven. And then a lot of elements to the salad, which is shaved fennel, radishes, the greens, dill, that microgreen, parsley. So a lot of, kind of pairing nightmares there, right? And then a jus, a very flavorful reduced jus. So the wine we picked on that as a consensus was the Detour, right?
On the reds.
On the reds. It may have been overall. The Grenache worked really well. The Detour worked really well. On the white, what did we say was the...
I think white Burgundy kind of won
The
the
Burgundy.
day.
Yeah.
White
Yeah.
Burgundy.
Yeah.
Although Viognier, I thought, was also okay. Just white Burgundy, I think, was the consensus.
Well, like I said, if you served any one of these wines to your friends, without the other 5, everybody go, ooh, what is this?
Yeah.
All right, I want to thank everybody. This was an awesome...
Been a great day.
experiment, and what I want people to get out of it is the dialogue of when you're cooking and you're pairing it with wine, all the elements that go into it, the sauces, the side dishes and all of that, and what you think or expect may work, may not be that. And I think, Andy, we ran the range, and Kelly, we had a Greek red, not common. We had a California Sauvignon Blanc. When you think of Sauvignon Blanc, I'm not sure California is, they make great stuff, but not the first thing you think of.
Yeah.
Burgundy, which I think goes well with, everything.
things, yeah.
Pinot Noir, which Burgundy is Pinot Noir. Hirsch is doing some good stuff out there, and the Girardin, and the Condro, which is probably the most interesting wine. Be experimental, explore, have a lot of fun. I also want to thank Kelly Schmidt and Andy Chabot again for guiding us on the wine side. Thank you to everyone, and like I said, hopefully everyone got something out of this. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick Latham.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.